Welcome to today's meeting of the Scrutiny Commission. As usual, this meeting will be filmed. Is being filmed for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's website. Please note anyone attending the meeting, including anyone in the public gallery, are entitled to film, record and report on the meeting in accordance with the Council's standing orders. Attendees are asked not to deliberately photograph, film, zoom in on, retain, publish or circulate the contents of members' or officers' laptop, tablets or phone screens, as these may contain confidential, exempt, personal, sensitive information. Anyone who believes that they may have inadvertently captured such information should not publish or share it and should notify Democratic Services. Apologies have been received from Mr. Mullaney and Mr. Boehm. Before we begin, can I remind everyone to turn on their microphones when they're invited to speak and turn them off when they've finished. So item 1, the first item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of June 2026. I move that are taken unread, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 2, question time. I've not received any questions from the public. Item 3, questions asked by members under Standing Order 32. No questions have been asked. Item 4, I have no urgent items. On to item 5, declarations of interest and respect on the agenda. Does anyone have any interest they wish to declare? No? Okay, on to item 6, declarations of the party whip. Do any members wish to declare the party whip? No? Okay, on to item 7, presentation of petitions under Standing Order 33. I've not received any petitions. So we move on to our first substantive item, which is item 8, the Leicestershire County Council Strategic Plan 2026 to 2030, which is on page 13 to 28. So Rosemary Whitelaw, Head of Governance and Strategy, will present the item. Jane Moore, the Chief Executive and the leader, and Mr. Dan Harrison are also here to present the item. Welcome, Jane and Leader. Leader, I understand you want to first introduce this item.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. This item sets out the Council's draft strategy plan for 2027 to 2031, which sets out the proposed vision, outcomes and priorities for a better Leicestershire. Our ambition is clear: to support strong, resilient Leicestershire, where people come first, communities can thrive, and every pound of public money delivers the greatest possible value for residents, communities and local economy. At a time of increasing demand and significant change across local government, it's more important than ever that we are focused on the outcome that matters most to residents. While ensuring the Council remains efficient, responsive and well governed, a plan provides a clear and stable foundation as we prepare for local government reorganisation, making sure that we continue to provide stability for residents while preparing for the future. The Commission's views will form an important part of the consultation process, and I help to shape the final plan before it's considered by Cabinet at full council. I will now hand over to Rosemary Whitelaw, Head of Services for Governance and Strategy, to take the Commission through the report. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Leader. As the Leader has outlined, this report presents a draft strategic plan and seeks the Commission's views as part of the formal consultation. The Council's current strategic plan reaches the end of its life cycle this year. The new plan provides an opportunity to refresh our vision, outcomes and priorities while retaining a clear focus on delivering positive outcomes for Leicestershire's residents and communities. We are, of course, developing the plan at a time of significant change. Local government reorganisation means that the plan will extend beyond the anticipated lifetime of the County Council in its current form. However, there's still a council to run and services to deliver throughout the transition. The intention is therefore that the plan provides a clear and stable foundation for the coming years, while being sufficiently focused on Leicestershire as a place to remain relevant and adaptable as new local government arrangements develop. As the Leader has outlined, the draft plan is built around 4 outcome areas: a better Leicestershire for residents, for communities, for the economy, and a better Leicestershire County Council. These bring together our priorities for supporting people to live well, building safe and connected communities, growing an innovative and thriving economy, and ensuring that the Council remains efficient, responsive, and ready for future challenges. The plan will be supported by a strategic implementation plan and a refreshed, more focused set of key performance indicators. Governance arrangements are also being developed so that progress can be monitored clearly through the Council's business planning and performance framework. The consultation runs until the 9th of October and is seeking feedback from residents, businesses, community groups, partner organisations, and staff. As the leader said, the comments made by the Commission today will form an important part of that process and will help inform the final version before it returns to Cabinet in November and then on to full Council in December. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything you want to add, Mr. Harrison?
No, at this stage, quite comfortable. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Questions from members? Mr. King?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mr. Harrison and Rosemary for outlining that. So I'm almost tempted to say, what's the point of this? LGR, if LGR is happening, is going to basically split up Leicestershire County Council, and during the the early part of this plan, many of the resources and many of the facilities that currently belong to the county council are going to clearly get transferred, potentially even in this building, to a new Leicester council, and it is unclear from this. Therefore, and my question really is this: how will the successor authority, or will they be bound to continue to follow the Leicestershire County Council's priorities if these are indeed the ones that are adopted, given the fact that the whole of the county is essentially going to be split up into these two new authorities, and then the new authority may decide that the priorities it wants to follow are different to those of Leicestershire County Council. It may not even have the same resources, certainly not going to have the same financial resources or estate to draw on. So I'm just wondering how some of these objectives are actually going to be delivered in the time frame you're talking about. And therefore, I come back to what I said. Is there really any point to this? I accept the council's got to carry on, but really coming up with a strategy when we're going to be cut up, carved up in the way the government is indicated, just to me seems a bit of a kind of waste of effort, really, when really our focus should be on how we're going to make sure that services are going to be safe and operational come the 1st of April 2028, given that Leicestershire County Council won't exist if the government's unitary proposals carry forward, which at the moment I've got no other information to say they won't. So that's my starting premise. And I'm really concerned about this because, as I say, a lot of the resources that I can see are going to get taken into the new Council of Leicester, and what's left is going to be somewhat different to what this plan is basically based on. And I'm just trying to understand how that's going to work. Thank you. Sorry, a bit of a long question, but there you go. Thank you.
James?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. King. I think you answered some of the question yourself. So part of the purpose of the strategic plan is ensuring that we continue to deliver our services safely in a robust way, and ensuring value for money as well. So you're absolutely right. Leicestershire County Council continues to exist until the 1st of April 2028. And we need to ensure that we have a solid strategic plan that continues to guide our direction and gives a framework in which to operate until April 2028. And it's even more important in light of LGR that we ensure that the services that currently are delivered by Leicestershire County Council move into the new unitary in a really robust fashion. So the two new unitaries that we are currently in the process of building will continue to deliver all of the services that are currently delivered by Leicester County Council, by Leicester City Council, and also by our districts and Rutland as well. So therefore, ensuring that we continue to deliver the services in a robust way will only prepare the unitary in the best possible way. You're right, there has been no decision yet around what transfers into which authority. The task given to us by government is to build 2 new unitaries that cover the footprint of Leicestershire and Rutland. And as you know from previous briefings, there is work now taking place to look at what those 2 new unitary councils look like. The new unitary doesn't need to follow this plan, and indeed the new unitary will be inheriting a number of plans from different local authorities, so they're absolutely not bound to. But I think this is the best way to ensure that Leicestershire County Council moves solidly into a new unitary, and that the services for which we are responsible continue to be delivered in a solid way. The new unitary will still need to deliver our children's social care services, our people services, our roads. They will be collecting the bins that the districts currently do. So ensuring that the transference of those local authority services happens in a really solid way is absolutely paramount.
Mr. Innes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to compliment the strategic plan for the next 4 years. I think it's a dramatic shift away from previous plans, because the focus is absolutely is more focused on service, financial sustainability, organisational effectiveness, which I think has been lacking in plans in the past. I'm even more gratified to see that we've dropped the green part of the previous strategies. I'm just interested to understand whether our residents are really interested in how Leicestershire is going to do 0.0, what's the famous figure, 0.09% or whatever it was, but maybe that's a different figure. But yeah, I'm really gratified by this plan. I have to echo what the Chief Executive has said. I think it is critical we have a plan through this change, because a lot of focus will be taken away from the county council operation, and it's critical that the county council operation continues right up to the end. We can't afford for people to be shifted, our services to be affected just because some I was going to be rude, but some person in Whitehall has decided that we're going to split up the county. We need to make sure that we're focusing 100% on our residents, and my aim will be to make sure that I follow this strategy and also deliver for Melton residents right up to the change of structure. I guess that leads me to the question. The key question is, how do we make sure that through this crazy change that we're about to go through, how do we make sure, and have you spent time actually thinking through how the resources are going to be allocated to the local government restructuring versus keeping our residents safe with the services that are required right up to the end of the county council? Thank you.
Want to take that?
Yeah, thank you, and really helpful feedback, and I think a really important question, and I think it's a question that we've been reflecting on since the point of the announcement of local government reorganisation. So every council in Leicestershire, Rutland and Leicester City has the challenge of how do we ensure that we can deliver local government organisation safely and in the best possible way for our residents, whilst continuing to deliver our business as usual activities as a council. And Mr. Innes, you're right, the challenges around the allocation of resources. So in terms of the delivery of the strategic plan, that will be delivered through our kind of business as usual work as a county council. It sets the direction of travel for the services for which we are responsible and for which the new unitary will continue to be responsible for. In terms of local government reorganisation, some time ago, we and other authorities allocated money that we would put towards ensuring that transition can be done safely. So we are currently in the process of making sure that we have the right resources wrapped around each council, but also across the LLR footprint to support the role I've been allocated, the role of senior responsible officer. So we've thought carefully about the resource needed in order to enable me to lead local government reorganisation across LLR safely, effectively and efficiently as well. So we're doing that through the allocation of resources. We're just working through what that looks like now in partnership with the other 9 local authorities going forward. But you're right to point it out, it's a huge task to continue to deliver business as usual and develop our services, continue to drive efficiencies alongside building the 2 new unitaries in preparation for local government reorganisation.
Thank you. Mr. Poland?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the report. I found it quite an interesting read. It's visually very, it's good to see, and I'm very reassured that I'm actually still younger than the average age for Leicestershire, which was a big plus for me. So thank you very much for that. I needed that. I needed to read that. So the one question I would ask is around KPIs. So whilst it's very interesting to sort of read, and the plan has fewer KPIs within it than previous plans. So I guess how do we know if we've sort of succeeded? How can we measure the outcomes in it? Because whilst I was to say the stuff in it is very laudable, how as scrutineers do we be able to sort of check if it's working, check if it's performed okay?
So first of all, we've mapped it to the local government outcomes framework to make sure that we're meeting those things. And that means that quite easily we can report properly on the KPIs within the plan, because data's already collected for those areas. So the plan is that we'll tweak your scrutiny performance reports that each of the departmental scrutiny committees receive, so that the scrutiny reports reflect the strategic plan outcomes, and you can monitor our performance against the strategic plan through the scrutiny process. Similarly, the annual delivery plan, which you receive on an annual basis in November at the Scrutiny Commission, will be aligned to the new strategic plan. So again, that will give you a chance to see on an annual basis how well we're delivering. And internally, we'll do reporting through departmental management teams.
Mr. Bulls?
Thank you very much, Chair, and much like Mr. Poland, I'm under that as well. So there you go. Team sub 43. There you go. But I want to congratulate the officers on the work. It is clear. It's a real statement of intent. But as people have said, there's a limitation to this because we don't know what's going to happen next year. I think this is a bit of a missed opportunity in a document, actually, because as individual members, we have a very limited voice in this process. And this is one of our few opportunities to say what we really want the future to look like, and moving into LGR, what we want it to look like. And I do wonder if there can be some sort of final page that says, as a council, this is what we want to see taken forward, as a culmination piece, because you've got your priorities on each page. I understand why they're important, because then you've got this is how we're going to measure it. But the real piece is that we're not saying is that we know it's not going to happen. And I think there's an opportunity at the end of this document to say, this is what we stand for as a council, and whatever administration takes over, whatever the council looks like in the future, these are our priorities that have been agreed upon as a mass, regardless of party, regardless of our priorities individually. This is what we as a council body say we want you to take forward. A bit like a manifesto, I guess, because this is our only opportunity to have a voice of what the future looks like of this council, and it's this document, because that's what's going to be passed over amongst lots of others. So less of a question, more of a potential thought. Can we include something in here that is our statement of intent, that whoever takes this forward, whatever the leader is moving forward, they have something to say, this was important to them, why was it? It might be a good place to start for the new council.
Not sure that sits under here, whether it's under the joint committees kind of what we work.
I was just going to come back on 2 things really. One is this isn't your only opportunity to influence what the new unitaries look like. So just to kind of assure members, there's a year and a half to go before we move into or disappear as a local authority. So this isn't the only option. I think the point you're making actually are really valuable, and I think there's something about being careful that we don't try to kind of influence the Leicestershire County Council way going forward. It will be a new unitary that will deliver all of the services that are currently delivered through local government. But you're right in the sense that we are the people that deliver children's social care, adult social care, highways, and it could be that we could just think about how we articulate some of the vision around how we deliver those services and why, without looking like we're trying to too heavily influence the future of the two new unitaries, because it really does need to be a new unitary for Leicestershire and Rutland that brings together the best of all of local government across LLR. So we can take that away and have a think about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So mine's a bit of a follow-on question from James's really, and unfortunately, like Mr. Bulls and Mr. Poland, I'm actually above the average age, so that's a bit of a shame for me. But looking at the report, it is graphically really, really good, and I understand it is a forward-looking plan, and there's lots of positive aspirations in there, which is fantastic. But at this stage, like Mr. Poland said, there's a lack of KPIs. We don't actually know how success will actually be judged. So my question is, before the full council, when we're asked to approve this, will members get the actual measurable targets? That will we actually get to see these baselines and the timescales, rather than just a broad sweeping comment of what success looks like? Thank you.
What we're doing at the moment is developing a strategic implementation plan that will sit underneath it, that's got all the KPIs in. Whether that's ready for December, I think I'm going to say probably not, but you will see it when it's done.
So just to clarify, then we're going to see the KPIs after we've taken the vote on it.
Normally, you would agree a set of priorities and then measure them. So I think that's reasonable.
I guess just for clarity, what we would ordinarily do is set out, are you confident with the direction of travel? And so the kind of statements, and I appreciate they are broad brush, but in terms of what would success look like, what we will then provide is a framework that tells you it has been successful or not. As Rosemary said, you already, those of you that sit on open scrutinies, you already have a framework by which you are able to receive KPIs and information. Those KPIs will be updated in line with the national framework, as Rosemary's already said, but they will also give an indication of how well we're doing. So the purpose of presenting the strategic plan to you today is to check, are we confident this is the right direction of travel? Is this where we want to go? Is this what we want success to look like? We then will provide the areas that tell you, yes, we're doing okay, we're meeting, we are being successful, or we're not doing quite as well there. So it would always follow later anyway, but you will have them. It's more about how we align the national priorities with the national outcomes framework, with the work that we need to put through here.
Do you want to come back, Mr. Innes?
If I may, Chair. I think the issue is, and I got slightly confused by this as well, I don't think this is a strategic plan. I think it's a strategic vision. When you call it a plan, I would expect plans. In business, we have a system of going through how that operates. So your strategic implementation plan is probably the next, as you say, that's the next stage of this. We're being asked to approve, in my eyes, a vision rather than a plan.
Right, Leader?
Yeah, thank you. No, that's absolutely right. In many ways, it's hard because it's impossible to know where we get off the bus, and when we know when we get on it, it's the turmoil, but when we get off, what will we be faced with? So the strategic outline is definitely a vision without all of the numbers, but I believe as we go forward, these will start to appear as we're working through this. But remember this, we had a plan, we're not planning to do anything. It is a plan. We have to get a vision together of where we want to be and how we want to be as an organisation. We don't know all the components. We just don't know what government might say next week or the following week. But we have to start somewhere. We would be neglectful, and it would be bad if we were just to sit silently and say, well, we'll wait for this to happen. It may this, it may be that. We have to create the vision is the beginning, where we want to be, how we're going to be, but we cannot describe all the bits because we don't know all the contingent parts yet. We don't know how it'll be. As we've said, we don't know who will be running and organising this. We've got to be able to help people to say this is a vision that's been looked at from a distance, because we can't put the finite to it, but at least we're putting something down as a marker to see we've got some vision. Can we alter it? Can we enhance it? Do we need to take that away? Do we need to add this? It's a start. And I think it's as much, with all honesty, hand on heart, that anybody can do at this stage. We just cannot absolutely nail it down. Why? Because we really don't know what government's final outcome's going to be on all of this. Whether they've got other ideas they want to bring through, I do not know. And we don't know how the whole thing's going to end up. So the vision is there. It will be enhanced. There'll be more detail added as we go along. And then eventually, but it won't be what that government's going to decide once elected. That'll be down to them. But at least they'll have a massive vision and a potential beginning of a plan that could be then orchestrated. And I think, in all honesty, that's what we're trying to do. We could sit back and say, well, what can we say? We've got no ideas how it's all going to turn out. That'd be honest. But we're trying to create something with all the knowledge we have and all the tools we have available, but it cannot be the total picture because who knows where it's going to be. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do you want to come back, Mr. Innes?
Yeah. How can I put this nicely? The vision, I absolutely buy into the vision. I'm 100% behind the vision. I think we're underselling ourselves. I think there is a plan. I just don't think it's written down. I think each of the departments are working now that the vision has been created. I hope that all of the different departmental directors are working now towards achieving, or assuming this is approved, will be working towards achieving this vision. And I think what will come out over the next few months is maybe not the finished article on the plan itself, but I think you can bring to this Scrutiny Commission interim updates on this is how we are going to achieve this plan. Now, the other thing I just want to, and Dan, I'm really sorry about this, but I need to, for the first time, disagree with you. I think the government reorganisation, local government reorganisation, and this was the point I was trying to make earlier, is a separate discussion. We need to be prepared for it. We need to talk about the resources, etc., about how we achieve it. But this plan is for the county council. It isn't for a unitary. This shouldn't be affected. So in effect, we'll have two dual processes going on. The vision here is to keep the residents of Leicestershire satisfied. They have the services that are required at the right quality. And a lot of what's in this strategic vision, I absolutely 100% agree with, because it's very much focused on the organisation, how it's going to deliver, how it's the efficiency process, etc. So I'm very, I understand the confusion of local government reform, but as a strategic vision, we need to make sure that we have a plan. If you understand what I'm saying. For me, this isn't a plan, it's a vision.
Do you want to come back? I'm not sure if...
Yeah, just briefly come back on that. I think you're absolutely right. I think we can have a look at the language in this to make sure it kind of reflects it's a vision. Page 18 of the currently called strategic plan does set out exactly as you've just described, Mr. Innes, which is we'd have our vision, there are a number of corporate strategies for which we are responsible, and then we would have a strategic implementation plan, and under that are all the department plans. So we've kind of listed it there, we can define it better. I think your point around LGR is a really important one, and it's one that we will keep talking about as we move through the process of LGR whilst running Leicestershire County Council. So I think those are really important points, that we are responsible still for running Leicestershire County Council and everything that Leicestershire County Council is responsible for, and alongside that we are also supporting the LGR process in the building of the 2 new unitaries. And the stronger we are going into one or two of the new unitaries, then the stronger those 2 new unitaries will be as well. So I think those are both really valid points. And we'll have a look at what we're currently calling strategic plan is called, so it kind of sets out really clearly what that is. So thank you.
Mr. King, did you want to come back?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thank you, officers, and Mr. Harrison for your answers. So good to see other colleagues catching up with the fact that this isn't a plan, it's a vision, and there isn't anything to dislike about it particularly, and I'd agree with that. But apart from the fact there's no KPIs, baselines, targets, or how any of it's going to actually be done. So it's not really a plan at the moment. So what I wanted to understand is whether any of the detail is going to come back. I've heard some vague thing about that, but I wasn't clear if that's coming back before this actually gets finalised, or we're just sticking with the vision document that you've produced and we're not going to see any of the underlying implementation. But one of the concerns I have got, having read it a few times, is, and Mr. Innes made some quip about it, but I mean, I do actually think, I know I'm not a big green fanatic or anything, but I do think this plan, this vision rather, does downplay residents' concerns. Certainly in my division and my area of about the natural environment, and the fact that the county council is kind of downgrading essentially its commitment to the natural environment into a sort of combo of communities, or it's kind of, there's a couple of lines in there. I think that's actually quite, I think that's actually negative about this vision. I think the county council should have a vision. Most of the county is geographically is rural. It is either farmland or natural environment, and and I think there should be some sort of clearly articulated vision of what it is the county council currently, as the custodian of those places, essentially what it wants to see for those places, not just wrapped up in something else. And I think, to me, that's something, if it's possible, should be given some thought to, putting in a clear priority on that. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, really. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, so just in terms of your first question around further information, so as you'll know from sitting on scrutinies in previous years, information on KPIs, performance against plans, will come back through, and for the strategic plan it will come back through this through Scrutiny Commission in order to update on the delivery of the plans. So the quick answer to your question is that yes, you will get an update on performance, and the KPIs then you will be aware of, because you'll get the update on performance against those KPIs. In terms of environment, I think the points that have been made around the fact that this is more of an overarching strategy as opposed to a plan probably answers the question about where the detail on environment is. So in the National Outcomes Framework, there will be some KPIs around environment that we are expected to report back on nationally. So those will appear in the KPIs. And as members have pointed out, at the point at which we produce a much more detailed delivery plan, I think some of those things that residents are concerned about will be pulled out through that plan, around the kind of things we're doing with the environment, around school places, around early years, and the things that our residents care about in terms of us as a county council. So again, that information will come back out through the plan. Sorry.
Do you want to come back now or at the end?
Chair, thank you. You must be assured of our greenness, our willingness to support. We control and support 62 farms. We have credibility in what we're doing in the environment, and it's important that we recognise those things. Yes, we've got thoughts and ideas how we want to go, but the basis is we're there, we're planting the trees, we're up to 600,000 trees planted, the millions our target. You know, we're not shying away from really doing things and working with nature, and we've got parklands that we look after and we want to support and see them enhanced as we go forward. So, you know, all I'm doing is just saying, look, we're getting the vision right, but we've not forgot that, because to me that's really important, is our environment and where we live and how we have our leisure, etc., etc. Thank you.
Just a quick point from me before we move on. So, like everyone said here, it's a really easy document to read through, very illustrated and clear. My only point is the residents won't read this whole document. They will look at your 4 pillars of your vision. And I'm just struggling. I've just recapped on what the last one was: clean and green, great communities, improved opportunities, strong economic, transport and infrastructure, safe and well. I then look at these ones and just the titles are just really wishy-washy, man. I don't understand what they actually mean. So better Leicestershire for residents, better Leicestershire for communities, better Leicestershire County Council, better Leicestershire economy. For me, those names, the titles, don't mean anything, won't mean anything to residents. I understand the rest of the plan kind of explains the vision and stuff like that, but residents are not going to read that. And if you want to connect with residents, you need to get them in the first second. And those 4 pillars are what they're going to read. What does a better Leicestershire County Council mean to residents? So I'm just trying to understand what those titles mean, because that is all residents will see. Who came up with them and what are they trying to say? Because I'm struggling to understand what it actually means. I don't really understand what it means. So what? Sorry? I've said I've read the document. What I'm saying is residents won't read the document. Excuse me. Do you want to speak on the microphone what you're saying, or are you just going to butt in? Thank you. So what I'm saying is I've read it. Residents will not read this document, so they won't understand what's behind those titles. So I would appreciate just some more thought going into how residents will understand that.
Yes, so what we can do is if you look at page 7, I mean, I think you're right. It's unusual for residents to read an entire document as well. So we do need to make sure that we get the narrative right so that people understand what we're seeking to achieve. So on page 7, what we were attempting to do is to kind of summarise the plan on a page. So I think we can have a look at the bullets underneath where it says a better Leicestershire for residents. At the moment, we're saying we want to care by supporting people to live well and achieve their full potential. We might need to expand that a little bit more in order to say this is what we mean by better Leicestershire as well. So we can have a look at that to make sure that when people do look at page 7, which is the summary, they understand when we talk about what a better Leicestershire for communities looks like, that bullet description so we can have a look at that to make sure we unpack it a bit more. Obviously, as you move through the document, it then becomes a lot clearer. So we've set out our priorities, we've set out the outcome, all of that. But I think we can go back and have a look at page 7 just to make sure it does what you say, that when you first look at it, you understand, a better Leicestershire for the economy, that they're looking at this, this and this. So we can do that without putting too much text in as well.
That's what I'm trying to get my point, that it just residents will only see those, because that's what you'll be promoting all the time, is those 4 pillars of your vision. And if it's not clear to me, it's not going to be clear to residents. So that's fine. Any other comments from here?
I had got one quick question. So I'd just like to ask Chief Executive and maybe the leader, does this vision strategy take into account the new Prime Minister's letter of last week or the week before, where he said he wants to rewire local government? So does this take into account the government's ambition? And secondly, does it also take into account the government's stated aim to essentially get councils building council houses and affordable houses? And I know there is something about housing in here, but it doesn't actually talk about that, because currently that's not a county council function. But that just exposes, to me, the issue that government priorities aren't quite matching currently to what county council is responsible for. But I just wanted to be clear about whether it does take into account yet those two statements from the government about affordable housing and rewiring local government. Thank you.
So I think the government does align to local government. They would be aligning to the district's plan. So I would assume that the districts will be now looking at their plans in terms of housing and making sure that aligns. Obviously, as a county council, we discussed this county council plan, so we wouldn't be, we're not responsible for the delivery of affordable housing. However, it does talk about making sure that we've got the resources in order to enable economic growth. So I'm less concerned about the housing bit, because we need to remember this is a plan for Leicestershire County Council. The two new unitaries obviously will need to reflect it. In terms of the rewiring local government, and we know that the narrative from the new Prime Minister has been very much about devolution, about giving power back to local government. I think the strategic plan does allow for a lot of that, because it talks about what we want to do at Leicestershire level in terms of aspirations for our residents, communities, economy, and the county council as a whole. I think some of it also links to the kind of twin track process of developing local government reorganisation, but also you would have seen the announcement last week by the 10 leaders around a hopeful mayoral strategic authority as well. So I think that's where the alignment comes in. Again, this strategic plan is about what we need to deliver for Leicestershire County Council as we continue to be Leicestershire County Council, and so it takes account of the things that Leicestershire County Council are responsible for until 2028.
Harrison.
All the documents I've had from government talk about the rewiring programme, but the initiative is about the mayoral process and how their vision is, and I use that word, their vision is they're going to change the whole of local government. Mayorals will have the power, they'll have the money, we will just carry on a function. But if we have a mayor embodied or part of going forward, it means we would receive more substantial funding to do particular projects that could benefit and to enhance what we're doing. So as the leader, I believe the mayoral is going to be good initiative, because it means we get funding. Otherwise we'd stand alone in the wilderness and we'd be left to whatever. We've got to move if that's where the money is going to be available and the initiative's going to be available. So there's a lot of things, but there isn't definition to it. It's like a vision, if I could just say that this morning. They've exploiting their vision of how they see it going forward. Obviously, we're just complying with that vision at this stage and just seeing where it all goes. Thank you.
Mr. Poland. North.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for explaining the Better Leicestershire strategy and the plan. I think the wording is self-explanatory. I think what my colleague and the chair was alluding to is where is the how and the why. And I think you've answered some of that, Jane, in being able to produce some sort of overview or KPIs, because I think as a resident, how is Leicestershire better for me? Why is it better? What's happening? What are we doing that's actually improving that service for me? And I think that would be some information I'd like to see in that overview of that page that you mentioned. But I feel it's very self-explanatory. I do think we get a good read audience as well. I just think the how and the why sometimes is missing, and that could be helpful. Thank you.
Anything else to add to what you were said? Okay, thank you, Mr. Poland.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an interesting discussion, and it's right. It's a vision document. I remember years ago, I mean, back 2011, I briefly worked for Leicester City Council, and as part of the intro, they showed me this vision document, and it was, "Don't we want Leicester to be great and free of crime?" And it's like, that's brilliant. Who would disagree with the things in it? And then, but actually, it's on how you deliver on those things that's important. So I do think it would be useful to have more measurable, appreciate what sort of comments have been made before, but there's more measurable things sitting below it or alongside it, because as I say, a vision document is by definition more general. That's the whole point of a vision, and you set your strategic priorities from that. So I would agree with that. And picking up comments from the chair, yeah, again, I can see sort of the point that says maybe they could be more specific to, you know, imagine it's on the in a library on a poster or something, and it catches you know, better Leicestershire for residents and better Leicestershire for communities. Would to me almost, if I was just looking at it passing, maybe would be interchangeable, because people can be communities and communities are made up of people. So maybe we need to talk about better Leicestershire for people. So that's care, that's services, that's those kind of things, and then a better Leicestershire for places. So that would be flooding and things that are affecting, you know, the landscape, the farms maybe would come under that. And then, you know, economy is self-explanatory, and then Leicestershire County Council as an organisation. So I think those two are fine, but you sort of go people, places, economy, and then the council, and that maybe might make it a bit clearer again for that person that's passing the poster in the library and just sort of goes, what's Leicestershire about? And maybe that, but yeah, as I said, it's been an interesting discussion, and there's nothing to, you know, there's nothing to disagree with in it. It's fine, but if we could maybe just have that bit more detail, that maybe make it a bit better to see, you know, in terms of measuring it.
Okay, I think we'll bring that item to an end. It might be just timely to remind members how this committee actually works. If you want to speak, please raise your hand. We don't have back chat when the chair's talking, so let's first day back at school, let's not be naughty. Okay, on to item 9, the MTFS monitoring and strategic update. So a supplementary report was circulated to members on the 26th of August and also published on the council website. This is the main report we'll be looking at today. Simone Hines, Assistant Director of Corporate Resources, will be introducing the report, and she's joined by Declan Keegan, Director. We're also joined by the leader member for Resources, Mr. Harrison Fowler, but I can't see Mr. Fowler in the room. Is the leader going to stay instead, or? I was expecting the lead member, Mr. Fowler, but he's not here. Oh, the leader's not staying either. Okay, so we have no lead member for this. Okay, over to you, Simone, when you're ready.
Thank you. So this report gives an update on the council's current financial position for the 26-27 financial year, based on the period 4 monitoring position. So that's as at the end of July, and then forecast for the rest of the year. It's also got a refresh capital programme, and then it goes into talk about some of the early issues that will shape the next round of the MTFS refresh as well. So in terms of 26-27, the headline position that you'll see in the report is a neutral sort of break-even position forecast for the year. And that's because there is a forecast underspend of 4.8 million across service and corporate budgets, but that then is being used to reduce the level of reserves that are needed to balance the budget. So members may remember that when the budget was set in February this year, 15.4 million of reserves was required to set that balanced budget. Based on that current position of having an underspend of 4.8 million at this point in the year, those reserves would then be reduced. So as things stand, that 15.4 million of reserves that was set, included in the budget when it was set, would reduce to about 10.5 million. But it obviously is very early in the financial year, so that's the forecast position at the moment, but it is likely to change as we go through the year. You'll see from the report that, as we talked about at previous meetings, the most significant financial risk for the council continues to be SEND or that high need spend. At the moment, we are forecasting a deficit of 62 million on the SEND budget this year. That is slightly lower than the budget that was set in February. So we set a deficit budget of 72 million. But it's too early really to tell if that improvement can be sustained for the rest of the year, because it is quite a volatile demand-led budget. And of course, even at that slightly improved position, it's still a very sort of substantial and sustainable position on that budget. So future government support for SEND does remain critical. We are still awaiting final confirmation. I think that our SEND reform plan has been approved, and that will allow release of the 90% grant towards the deficit. But of course, that 90% deficit is only towards the deficit accrued up to March 2026. So the deficit that we're now accruing from this year forward hasn't yet been confirmed that will be covered by grant. So that's why that remains that significant risk. Away from SEND, across other general fund services, The position is mixed. I think you'll see through the appendices where you can see the variances, but it is broadly manageable at this stage of the year. Children and Family Services is forecasting an underspend of about 2.5 million, which is due to lower average unit costs actually across children's social care placements. So we are seeing some of that demand and cost management work that we've been kind of focusing very hard on over the last few years starting to have some really good results. Adults and Cultural Services is very close to budget, especially given the size of the budget. Although again, you'll see in the detail that there is quite a mixed picture across adults. So we are seeing some areas of overspend, so particularly supported living. We're seeing some growth in demand there and some higher needs there, but there are underspends across other parts of the service that's helping to mitigate that. We're also continuing to see higher investment income as well, which is obviously positive, and that's due to interest rates staying higher for longer and the council having some higher cash balances as well. We are still monitoring savings delivery very closely during the year. So when we set the budget and the MTFS, we have 23 million of savings to be delivered this year. So the MTFS is sort of predicated on delivery of those savings in year. Most are on track, but again, you'll see from the report that there are a small number where there are some risks and some sort of delay in delivery. So we are monitoring those closely, but where we do have those concerns, we have already reflected that in that budget monitoring position as well. Then just moving on to capital, the updated 4-year programme stands at around 600 million, and the funding shortfall in the programme has reduced slightly. So in the MTFS approved in February, there was a gap in the capital programme of 65 million. The latest forecast is that has reduced slightly to 57. But as we've highlighted in the report, there are some potential future pressures on the capital programme. So again, that position is subject to change. And we're seeing some pressures, particularly around school places and potentially highway schemes as well. So there is some positive improvement at the moment, but I suspect that will change as we go through the MTFS refresh. And then just looking ahead at that refresh, we are underway with that now. So sort of the finance team are engaging with service colleagues to review assumptions that are currently in the MTFS, particularly looking at what those demand pressures are likely to be over the next 4 years. And we will then reflect any impact from the autumn budget, which is due at the end of October. And it's the national living wage particularly that can have quite a large impact on the council. So we particularly look out for that. And of course, they are outside of the council's control as well. And whilst at the moment we do have a multi-year settlement, so the local government settlement that we had at Christmas last year, what was multi-year, I think the new Prime Minister and potentially changing priorities there would give us more risk for that settlement changing than perhaps we might have expected. But again, we'll have to wait and see what happens through the autumn. We are then also continuing to mobilise the Better Leicestershire programme, which emerged from the efficiency review. And as we do that MTFS refresh, I would expect to see more of those savings reflected in the MTFS as we start to deliver them. And we will be bringing a fuller update on Better Leicestershire to Scrutiny at a later point in the autumn. So I guess in summary, I think the in-year position is showing some improvement compared to the budget that was set, but we are still expecting that some level of reserves will be needed to balance. And so some of those underlying structural challenges still remain, and you will see those still, I think, in the MTFS refresh when that comes through. That's probably all I need to say by way of introduction. Members are just asked to note the report at this stage, but obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Simone. Declan, is there anything you want to add at this point?
No, nothing to add.
I think we just need to note, as a Scrutiny Commission, how disappointed we are that there's no political representative here, not from the leader or the lead member. This is a really important committee of the council, and this is the budget forecast, and we should be having political support at these meetings. So I think as a Scrutiny Commission, we need to feed that back to the administration that this position is not acceptable. These meetings are in the diary for a long time ahead. So I hope Scrutiny Commission will support in sending that message back to the administration. Any questions from members? Dr. North.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Simone. Could you please explain for me then whether we've reduced our reserves or actually made a saving? Because I know you started off explaining that, but I wasn't really clear. So I just want a bit more. Thank you.
So when we set the budget in February, we had to incorporate £15.5 million worth of reserves to enable that budget to balance, because at that point expenditure was more than the income we were expecting, and so we had to put 15 million of reserves in to balance. Now we are at period 4 during the year. There is an underspend across our services and corporate budgets of about 4.8 million. So the budget that we set that we were intending to spend across our services, we're underspending by 4.8. That will mean then that the 15 million of reserves that we needed to put in to balance the budget can reduce by the 4.8. But as things stand, we will still need to use 10.5 million to balance. So there are underspends across services, but that just means there is a lower call on reserves than we expected. Does that help?
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to this, I saw a graphic on social media the other day about the county council saving 4.8 million, and very positive and everything else like that. But actually reading into this report, as you've just admitted to, that's not the case. Whilst the saving is there, you basically stopped spending more reserves. So, when can the council realistically expect to stop delving into reserves to balance the annual budget?
Certainly for this year, we will continue to monitor the budget as we are doing now. But obviously there would need to be a further sort of £10 million in improvement in our budget management position to be able not to have to call on those reserves at all. But it'll be a live moving position as we go through the year. And of course, the biggest chunk of our budget is demand-led social care, which is volatile and is subject to change. So that, if the improvement that we're seeing at the moment continues, to improve at a similar rate or even a better rate, then we might be able to reduce that call on reserves. But I think at this stage it is quite early in the year to be able to determine that.
I find the graphics that the council are putting out a little bit duplicitous, because on one hand you're saying you've saved all this money, and on the other hand you're reaching into your pocket to take out money to basically balance the books. So what the county council are putting out as comms is factually incorrect and duplicitous. We should not be doing that, because we're telling residents we've saved all this money. And whilst I appreciate the savings are there, we'd budgeted £15 million to balance the books out of reserves. That is not the same as having the cash in your pocket to spend.
Just respond to that. Just to be clear, though, what we are saying is, compared to the budget that we expected to spend across our key services and our corporate budgets, there is an underspend across our service budgets compared to what we expected to spend in February. And the largest area of saving at the moment is across children and families, where we've got, I think it's a £2.5 million underspend overall. And that is because, some of our demand management work is starting to take shape. We are seeing lower average unit costs compared to what we expected in the budget. So the position now compared to where it was in February is an improvement. But that then means that we don't need to use as many reserves to balance. But there are underspends within budgets compared to where we expected to be when we set that budget in February.
Jack, just
Declan, yeah.
I think it is important to point out budget monitoring, as Simone has described, it's monitoring against the budget was set by February, so everything that was put out is factually correct. We haven't changed anything in the approach for budget monitoring over the last few years, including sort of the 2 years before when reserves were used as well. So there hasn't been a change in approach. And budget monitoring, it just is what it is. The budget was set in February, and we're just making sort of commentary against that budget that was set.
Could I just on this point very quickly before I come back to you? I noticed on page paragraph 117, it does say that reserves are forecast to be used in 24-25 and 25-26. My understanding is that they were not used in the end. But the comment in the report doesn't make that clear. So I think that's quite misleading. So they were budgeted to be used, but as far as I recall, no reserves have been used in 24-25, 25-26. Can you just clarify whether that's right or I'm misunderstanding incorrectly?
No, that is correct. I think that what that paragraph is saying is that as when we set the budget in the last 3 years, actually, we did in the same way that we've had for 26-27, we did expect to need to use reserves, or we had to use reserves to set that balanced budget. But then as the year has progressed and we've seen improvements in various forecasts, we've been able to reduce that level of reserves. In the previous 2 years, that then did reduce to zero. Honestly, at the moment, the 26-27 monitoring is showing that the level of reserves that we're expected to use is lower, it is reducing. But of course, it is early in the year, and that could go, could still go either way before year end.
I just think that paragraph needs altering to say that at the end of year period 12, at the end of year, no reserves were used, because I find that paragraph quite misleading. So I'd appreciate if you take that back on board. Mr. Smith, did you want to come back?
Yeah, I've just pulled it up online. So Leicestershire County Council, page 6 days ago, £4.7 million underspend, a further £10 million of debt repaid. Our latest budget update is showing improved financial picture, which I'm not denying. It's how the communication has come across. It doesn't line up, doesn't marry.
Mr. King.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Echo your comments about the fact there's no political lead here. To take the political questions, I'm sorry, officers, I know you've got a very difficult job, but you've been thrown, I do feel, Chair, that they've been thrown under the bus here, and I don't think that's in order at all. And because these are, as Mr. Smith just read out, there are, I won't say it's factually inaccurate, but certainly misleading, I think, public statements being made by on the County Council's behalf. So coming back to this reserves question, the paragraph 117 is very clear that reserves were allocated in the budget, 6 million, 5 million, and 50, and tripling in this year's budget of 15, which you just told us, Simone, is now forecast at 10.6 million requirements for the year. Do you think that 10.6 million will still be fully needed, or do you think there'll be a further improvement and we'll get down? But you've also confirmed that previous years in 24-25, 25-26, that the reserve allocation wasn't actually needed, so therefore there was no drawdown from reserves. So this is money that is a one-off. So it's not a neutral situation. So I'm a bit concerned. So I wanted to understand that first of all, and I have got a couple of further points that I want to raise about. Thank you, Chair.
So just to be clear, the question there is around whether we expect the reserve.
Do you expect the 10.6 million to improve further? And the question I'm just trying to understand. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to understand. Yeah, thank you.
So I guess, as I mentioned earlier, this is still quite early on in the financial year, and a big chunk of our budgets are demand led, and therefore are volatile and subject to change. All we can do at the moment is look at what the trends are and forecast them forward, which is what we've done. So as things stand, we are forecasting that we will still need to draw down that £10 million reserves. If you look, though, at trends over the last 2 years, our budget monitoring position has improved further as the year's gone on. So if those sort of similar historical trends continue, you would expect that 10 million to reduce further, but you have to, I think, base budget monitoring on what you're seeing each year, and particularly with some of those demand-led trends. And of course, we've got factors such as inflation, which could still deteriorate further and place further pressures on us. So if you compared it to previous years, you perhaps would expect further improvement, but we will just need to monitor closely, particularly those demand-led services.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. It's difficult because you're just giving. I haven't got a political answer here, but so just to be very clear, we have, and as is mentioned in the report, the underlying structural deficit hasn't been eliminated. We've still got a requirement. This year's budget required a tripling of the reserve contribution from the previous 2 years' budgets to be put into the budget, although they weren't actually needed. So the fact that we're still not. I mean, I appreciate we're early on in the budget year, but my thought is I can't really see us closing the 10.6 million gap and not needing any of that money at all. But coming to the further question I've got, the administration has repeatedly claimed to pay off nearly £27 million of debt. I'm just trying to understand. On the one hand, it's claiming to have repaid external debt. I'm assuming that was debt that was scheduled to be repaid anyway as part of the repayment schedules. But on the other hand, we've got 57 million, I think, of internal borrowing requirements that are still got no source of funding attached to them, as I understood from the report. So I'm just in my head, I'm thinking, well, is this a question of we're robbing Peter to pay Paul going on. And I appreciate you may not want to answer that particularly, but I'm just trying to understand where we are with these debt claims about repayment of debt. And given that we've got all this internal borrowing that we still need to make in order to, for example, deliver on the capital programme, which is part of the approved budget. So I'm just trying to understand how we're going to do that. Thank you.
So as you outlined, we have repaid, I think it's £36 million of debt now since the start of April. That is external debt. That is early repayment of debt as well. So it wasn't just debt that was scheduled to be repaid at a certain time. It is the council repaying that earlier than we were due to, and that was based on movement of interest rates, and is looking at actually the interest saved on us repaying that debt early actually makes financial sense. And we've got the cash balances to be able to do that. So it's repaying external debt because we've got internal cash balances that can stand that. Then there's a slightly different issue there around the capital programme shortfall. So as the report says, we are forecasting a £57 million shortfall at the moment over the next 4 years. And there are a variety of options open to us to be able to close that. We could look at prioritising the schemes that are in the programme to try and reduce that shortfall. There could be other sources of funding, such as increased capital receipts from our asset disposal programme, or but borrowing may be an option in the future. But we do have an option of internally borrowing again, or it may be that later down the line, if we do have to take external borrowing out, it may be at a lower interest rate than the debt we've just repaid. And of course, we've saved the interest on that debt in the meantime. So we've taken a decision at the moment based on what makes sort of financial sense, but, based on the debt that we've repaid and looking at our future cash balances. And then we will have through the MTFS refresh, a review of the capital programme priorities and funding options to look at what we might need to do in the future. And of course, we do have LGR in the mix there as well, which may change capital priorities through the MTFS.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Is it another question?
Well, if I can just come back on that point.
Okay, and then
that's very helpful. What I wanted to understand that what might be helpful though, Chair, is and I'm not sure if Simone can do this. Is it possible we can get some more detail about the ins and outs of this early debt repayment that you mentioned? Because clearly, how I understand it works is we're on a long-term debt repayment plan over so many years with, I assume it's the Public Works Loan Board, and normally there's quite severe penalties for early repayments. So I'm just trying to understand what the plus and minus was, basically the ins and outs of that. And I do think, given it's a significant amount, that maybe as scrutiny we should get to see what the details of this are and what's actually been factored in to this. If we could, Chair. Thank you.
We can share those specific details after the meeting if that's helpful. But what we do when we're considering any debt repayment, we will look at what any premium is, because as you said, there are often premiums associated with repaying that debt early. But we will compare what that premium is against the interest saved, and particularly some of the debt that we have repaid was at, I think, 7-8% interest. So saving that interest over the next, again, I think some of the debt left has got 20 to 30 years left to run on it. So saving 7% interest on those loans for the next 30 years compared to the premium that we might need to pay to repay that debt early, we do that analysis to make sure that is good, makes sort of good financial sense, and that we have a net saving from that kind of analysis before we decide whether to repay any debt. But we can share the details afterwards.
I'll come back to you for your other questions if that's all right. Just let other people have a go. Yeah.
Yes, Chair. I just want to say thank you for that. That's, of course, good sound Treasury management to do such things. Thank you, Chair.
So I've got Dr. Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious about Appendix E, savings under development, because there's a heck of a lot of amber there for something that we're only effectively reporting on Q1. As Declan says, it's early, but I thought we might be doing a bit better with stuff. There's some useful green lower down, but I'm a bit bothered that we've got all these savings and development and doesn't seem to be massive confidence of delivery at this stage anyway. Thank you, Chair.
I think that is the nature of a saving under development, to be fair. So if they were rated green and we had sort of sufficient confidence around their delivery, then we would be putting them in the MTFS and actually tracking their delivery and giving them targets. I think at this point they are savings that we are we are developing in terms of understanding timescale for delivery, what the level of saving is, and any kind of service implications. Once those things have reached a level of confidence, then they will be promoted into the MTFS. So I would hope that some of those SUDs, as we call them, you will see as we do the MTFS refresh and bring forward a draft budget later this year, you will see some of those ambers sort of change into green and being added into the MTFS. But that is the difference really between a saving under development and a saving that is in the MTFS, because by their nature, they are still being developed and we don't have all the information yet to be able to put them in the MTFS.
Mr. Poland?
Thank you. Just to really clarify my understanding of some of the previous questions and answers we've had so far then. So the last, so 2024, 25 and 25, 26 have budgeted for the use of reserves, but in the end, they weren't actually required. Am I right in saying that we never needed to use budget reserves to balance the budget prior to that? Is that correct? First, I guess, is the first question.
So in terms of, yes, 24, 25 and 25, 26, we did. So at the time that we had to set the budget, we weren't able to balance the budget without the use of reserves.
Yeah.
I think it was something like 6.5 and nearly 5, I think, in terms of those 2 years. The position then improved during the year, partly because of that very close financial monitoring, so that then we didn't, as you said, we didn't need to use reserves. In terms of the previous years before that, I don't believe we needed to use reserve to balance the budget before those 2 years, but I'll let Declan confirm that.
Depends how far you want to go back. But if you say within the last decade, 2 decades, I can't remember a time we've needed reserves.
Okay. So if I can come back on that point. So, okay. So, but we are looking potentially like we'll be needing reserves this year as we sit here today, although I appreciate there's lots of things in the air, demand can change and all those sorts of things can change. So would it be fair to say then when the council have talked about saving the money, what we're talking about is being less in deficit than we otherwise would have been, rather than actual savings? We're just less in deficit than we otherwise would be.
So there is still a call on reserves in the current forecast. What we are saying though is that compared to the budgets that we set in February, we are doing better. So our Children and Family Service has got an underspend of 2.5 million compared to the budget. So they have saved 2.5 million against the budget that was set for Children and Family Services in February. The same with our investment income, we set a budget for investment income, but actually we've exceeded that. So we have more investment income than we expected to have in February. So we have got improved performance across our service areas. So that, and there are savings in there. What we're then using those savings for is to reduce the level of reserves that we may need to balance the budget by the end of the year.
Just cut in here, sorry, Jane. I think what we're trying to get out is that language is really important, especially when we're answerable to residents who all elect us and pay their council tax to us, that communication and language must not be misleading. And I think that's the point we're sitting at today. I understand there's an underspend, but it's not an underspend that we're going to save money. It's just a less of deficit. And I think that's not the message that's being put out there on behalf of the county council. And I think that's the message from today, is that we mustn't be misleading. And I think it's not a question for you two, it's more of a political question, but we have no one here to answer it. So I still need to get that clarity on behalf of the Scrutiny Commission, but you're the only 2 people here that can answer that.
So just on that, Chair, I do stand by the language in the report. The budget monitoring is there to monitor against the budget. It's an underspend against that budget. The language is not misleading. I'm sorry if members don't like the message, but to accuse officers of creating a report with misleading language.
No, I didn't say it was officers.
No, I'm sorry, but that's where the language is. We've been asked the same question by sort of 3 different people now. The report is not misleading. Budget monitoring is what it is. If you can show where it actually is misleading, we're happy to look at it and we're happy to correct it. But we've clarified it several times now. We're just being sort of barracked for the same point.
That's my point. There's no political. What I'm saying is messages put out on behalf of the council. I didn't say the report. We've all been very clear that it's been messages put out on behalf of the county council that we feel are misleading, not officers' report. We've never sat there, and I understand you're in a difficult position because there's no political. This would be a political question that we would be putting. So I'm not accusing officers of misleading. And what I'm saying is communication put out on behalf of the council is not very clear, I think. So
sorry, the press release comes from the report.
We're not
I think
talking
it's
about the
sort of-
press release.
but
We're not
if
talking about
it's
the press
social media, fair enough, but then this forum isn't for social media.
Yeah,
This is about the report that we're doing. We're being repeatedly asked questions about social media when we're here to respond about the report, so we can keep focused on the report. The meeting will go a lot smoother.
Mr. Powell, I'll come back to you now.
Yeah, no, just to clarify, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, I'm just trying to clarify my understanding of the situation, and that the reality is looking like we might have to use reserves for the first time, maybe in our history. That's the service demand is what it is. I mean, that's in the hands of the gods, frankly. It's not anyone's fault. It's just me trying to clarify understanding, and that, certainly speaking for myself, that's the purpose behind my question.
Thank you, Mr. Innes.
Thank you, Chair. Could we maybe not be using reserves this year then? Because we may be using reserves, or we may not be using reserves. We're 3 months or 4 months into a budget year. I know not a lot of people are in business, but we wouldn't be. We track budgets. We look at where the budget is in. The actual versus the budget as you go through the year. The fact is that we have saved money against our budget. That's a fact. You cannot dispute that unless you want to dispute it. And I, for one, am not backing this move to say, oh, the council have been sending out misleading messages, or somebody's been sending out misleading messages. There is a fact, and I've heard it a number of times from the officers. We have saved money against the budget. If you want to dispute that, then bring some figures and show me that we haven't saved money against the budget, but we have. So whether you want to mislead the residents by saying, oh, well, but there's reserves. Businesses use reserves all the time to balance budgets. It's a fact. That's what happens. I know a lot of you haven't been in business, but the fact of the matter is you have to use reserves. You do that. That's what businesses do. So stop trying to make political points out of this, which is exactly what Declan's saying. Let's look at the report and let's discuss the report. But this isn't for political measures. This is for actually looking at where we are against the budget. And that's what we're doing.
I didn't hear a question in there, so I'll move on to Dr. North.
Thank you, Chair. Right, if we get back to business and what we're all here for, if you don't mind, Simone and Declan, if I can ask, I think we're forecasting currently in the high needs development a 62.2 million overspend. It's a really delicate area, and I feel like every year we get caught out in this area too. There seems to be lots of things missed, or we have to go back over. So what gives us the confidence that this forecast will not increase even further than this? And I appreciate there's a lot of historic values that we can compare against, but it is a really high spend area. So I want to know how accurate you think that figure might be, please.
It is a difficult area because it's volatile, it's demand led. But what we have got in the report is some analysis of the demand that the increase in demand that we've seen so far this year compared to previous years, and we are seeing I'll call it a slowdown in the growth rather than any sort of reduction in demand. But I think, as we say in there, although we are seeing at the moment, slightly lower demand and a sort of a lower cost placement mix, if you like, which is reducing unit costs, it is still a deficit, quite a significant deficit position, which is going to put pressure on our MTFS. We don't yet know what government support might be beyond March 26, but also it is a trend that's based on a relatively short period. So if you looked at that trend based on kind of some historic patterns, you might well think that could start to increase again. But what we're saying at the moment is compared to historic trends that we've seen over the last couple of years, the rate of increase of demand in the first quarter of the year is lower than it was. that there's no guarantee that that will continue. What we have also referred to in the report, though, is that we have had the Transforming Send in Leicestershire programme running for some years now, and actually there are demand management kind of activities that have been going on as part of that programme, and actually maybe it is those, you know, that work that is now starting to help reduce the demand in this area and manage it in a different way.
Just picking up on that point, I've got one question as well. The 62 that's million in this report, is that since March 2026, or so this is our actual debt? This is not included within the government's 90% payoff. So this is actually, we don't know at the minute how we're going to pay, but this is actual debt sitting on the council's, well, still off it because we've still got the override. But this 62 is not included in the possible 90% payoff. So this is from March to now. So period 4. We've overspent by 62 million. Is that right?
That's right. That's the forecast for the year. So based on what we're seeing in the first 4 months of the year, if that trend continues, we would expect to have a deficit of 62 million by the end of the year. That is just from the 1st of April, as you've said. So that is just the in-year deficit. It's not cumulative. And the government support, the confirmed government support at the moment is only up to the 31st of March 26. So this 62 million that we're now accruing, we don't yet have any confirmation about what the government support for that will be. Whether that 90% will continue or not, the government have actually said they don't expect to make any further announcements on that until, I think, 2028 was the last update we had. So I think as we're preparing the MTFS for 27-28, we may not have any clarification from government as to what that further support is going to be.
Okay, thank you for that. That's really clear now. So we were still keeping, I don't know if it was still 50% or you dropped it down to 40% of the deficit. We were holding cash balances to pay that off. So how much are we still holding? Because I think we were at the hope that we could get rid of that sort of safety net. So how much money is there sitting in that pot that we put aside to pay off the high needs deficit now compared to where we think we'll be in a year's time with a debt of 62? It could go up or down, but that's what you're forecasting.
So again, there's sort of two things going on there. So in terms of the cumulative deficit that was built up to the end of March, when we set the budget in February, we made some assumptions about what that 90% grant would be against that cumulative deficit. There was some then headroom compared to the reserve that we've been setting aside, and we released some of that headroom as part of the MTFS in February. So that kind of cumulative position, we have released some of the headroom that we don't expect to need because of the grant. Going forward, though, so this deficit that's now building up again from April, because we don't know whether there will be any support or what level it will be, the current MTFS still assumes the same level of reserve contribution as it always has. So at the moment, we are still assuming the 50% set aside from 26-27 onwards. We will need to review that, I think, as part of the MTFS refresh, but it will be quite difficult in the absence of any confirmation about future support around what we, you know, what prudence we take in the MTFS on that.
But that's still sitting off the books because the override doesn't happen until 28.
The override is in place until 2028, and at that point, the deficit or responsibility for send should transfer to government anyway.
So we could go into LGR with a massive deficit on high needs because we're probably not going to know before we transfer the council.
So there will be 2 years worth of deficits built up that at the moment we don't have any confirmation of support. So that's the 26-27 and 27-28 deficits will be accruing. And as you said, at the moment we'll sit on the council's balance sheet until the government confirm otherwise.
Sorry, I cut over you. Was there anything else you wanted to add for that, Dr. North?
Did you stole my line of questioning? Okay. No, I think Simone's answered it now. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this is a political question. Unfortunately, we don't have a lead member, and you know the leader decided he didn't want to stay and answer any questions on his behalf. So it's more of a, I'm going to rephrase it almost as a statement, really. As we all know, each 1% of council tax rise equates to roughly 4.4 million. Is that right? Yep. So the MTFS currently assumes that the council tax increase of 2.99% in future years, but this report specifically identifies the ability to increase it up to 4.99. And I would be really interested to know, is that something now that this administration are actively considering and pursuing, but obviously there's nobody here to answer that.
I'm not sure you can answer that, can you really? Yeah, we'll take it back and come back. Will we get an answer in the minutes of the Scrutiny Commission? Okay, we'll put to lead member, and I think it should be on the minutes of the meeting rather than just sent around an email to members. It needs to be the questions asked in a public forum, the answer needs to be given in a public forum. Was there anything else, Mr. Smith? No. Mr. King, did you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry, if I could just go back to the SEN, the deficit. Just trying to understand how big that's going to be. Sorry, I kind of no, I understand the government's agreed to write off. Is it up to 90% of the accumulated deficit up to a certain point? But you've just said 2 years. We're not clear about. What happens with LGR? Are we splitting our debt off to so that the new Leicester Council will get a proportionate amount of our debt? Will get shall we say, the new Leicestershire and Rutland Council? Is that what's going to happen? It's going to get kind of split out, so they're going to get a load more debt, and whatever's left will have, obviously you'll have to add in Rutland's. Well, obviously I don't know how much that is. But are you able to give any kind of feel for the numbers on that at all at the moment?
No, in terms of the principle, that's absolutely right. And that as we go through the transition process, we will need to disaggregate balance sheets. So the existing county balance sheet, we will need to agree some principles around how elements of that are disaggregated to the new expanded city. That will include the DSG deficit. And as you said, Rutland's balance sheet will sort of need to be incorporated into the new authority as well. I don't think Rutland have a deficit, or if they do, it's very, very minor. But in terms of how that disaggregation will be done and what principles will apply to splitting some of those deficits, I think that's still for discussion through the implementation board and the transition plan.
And sorry, I can come back on that. Does it also apply to our positive assets in terms of cash reserves and investment things that we have, assets that we have as well?
Yeah. The entire balance sheet, there will need to be consideration to how we disaggregate the entire.
I did know that, but I'm kind of, it's some big numbers there, So just coming back to the other question I got was about savings. Now, a couple of meetings ago, the leader, when he was here, and the lead member said he knew where the big money was a year ago and where the big savings were going to be. We then had the Newton efficiency review, which is still going on at the moment, where we've got this mythical £60 million that's going to be saved. But what I'm concerned about is in this report, I think is it 23 million was due in the current year to support the budget. And am I right that 0.6 million is already forecast to be missed? And another 3.9 has got concerns around deliverability, whether it's actually deliverable in year. So what I'm trying to understand is that's 4.5 million of the 23 million. So that's roughly about a quarter of what the savings which are due in the year. But strangely enough, it's just a factual situation, isn't it? That that's actually about the amount that we just were talking about earlier in terms of the use of reserves. But that's likely to be missed. But I'm just wondering, do we have any clearer idea about how deliverable these 23 million in savings are? Are we going to be significantly away? We're already a quarter away from it. That we're not going to be, or we've got concerns about deliverability. Is that likely to increase as we go forward, or are we hoping we're going to be able to nail the 23 million? Just trying to, what's your level of confidence basically in this? Thank you.
So as we've got in the report, there's 4 exceptions at the moment, which is the 0.6 million. That is already included in the budget monitoring position there. So it's not that we haven't yet factored in that risk. We are already have already built that into the monitoring position. And some of those have been that they're being delivered in other ways. There might be other underspends that are offsetting some of those risks. And for some of them, it may just be that the phasing slightly different. So it's not that they're not going to be achieved. It's just that the phasing of the saving might be slightly different to what we originally anticipated. And just to be clear, the 23 million that's included in the current year budget is largely not the efficiency review savings, because at the point that we set the budget, the efficiency review hadn't quite completed. I think there's only one efficiency review saving that's in there. The rest were existing council initiatives that we're already delivering. The efficiency review opportunities you will start to see come through the MTFS refresh, and see more information on that in the next report, or certainly before Christmas. So just there is a distinction there between what's already in the MTFS that we're delivering and what we would expect to see come through the next refresh.
Okay, thanks for that.
Dr. Hill.
Thank you. Just to go back to Councillor King's point about who has what and the arguments. Councillor Galton said, because he's about the only person still around as a councillor and probably as an officer who remembers this, last time it happened, he said some of the bitterest arguments are about who had the assets and who took on the debts. So you've got that joy to look forward to, people. Thank you.
Thanks for cheering us up. Any other questions from members? Okay, I've got a few to go through, if that's okay. Just on paragraph 32, can you just explain what obviously there's an overspend of 1.2 million on direct cash payments, and then there's talk about clawbacks. Can you just explain what that means, please?
So as part of that service, the adult social care team do review the direct payment balances that our service users have against what they've been given that direct payment for. So a service user can opt for a direct payment whereby they have the cash on a card that they can then use to arrange their own care. Obviously, we have to then do regular reviews of those kind of care agreements to make sure they are being spent as they should be. And if they are not being spent, either because the care's changed, or the needs changed and they're not needing to use their direct payment in the same way, then we are able to claw back any surpluses that are sitting on those cards. And that is so that at the moment there is a shortfall of what we would have expected to claw back compared to what we set in the budget. I think the department are working to try and get that back on track, but that is the process. So it's we allocate service users a payment onto their card that they use for their own care. But we do regular reviews of that, and where it's not needed, we can claw it back, and we do set a target for that.
So it's trying to claw back money from residents that have got payments.
Social care users, yeah.
Right, okay. So obviously we all know everyone's struggling at the moment. So if they've got to pay a load of money back, is there a payment plan for them to do that, or they just how does that work?
It's more. It would be where there is a balance sat on the card. So because their need has changed, or actually the care they've arranged might not cost as much as the care plan says, there will be a balance on their card that they've not spent, and then we are able to ask them to return that balance because they're not using it for the purpose that it was intended. There are rules though around how we can do that, and the council isn't able to do that unilaterally. You have to engage with the service user on that. So it's not that they wouldn't necessarily need a payment plan because it's a surplus that's sat on their card balance. Makes sense.
Okay, thank you for that. My next one is on paragraph 38. So the Home First, part of the Heart Re-enablement Service. From what I read from that, they're really struggling to recruit the people they need to carry out that service. Remains difficult within social care. But this was a huge part of the efficiency review, wasn't it? It was really extending this service to try and save money. So the difficulty with recruiting there, is that just our basic model that we had before, or is this part of the efficiency review that we can't recruit the additional people? What is this telling me?
I think there's a bit of both in there. I think certainly for the first part of the year, the efficiency review opportunity hadn't been mobilised. I think we are at the point now where we are so some of the the opportunities and the techniques that the efficiency review was suggesting we needed to look at for that team. So things like I think it's reviewing job descriptions and kind of ways of working. I think that work is being done now. So we would expect that some of those benefits would start to be seen towards the sort of the second half of the year but I think the recruitment is a rolling process. So we should start to see some improvements from making some of those changes that the efficiency review highlighted.
Pick up that there's obviously an underspend here. So is that a reduction in delivery of service, or are we classing that as a savings? How's that those underspends getting batched? Because obviously if you've not got the staff to do the work that we need doing, is that a saving? Are we classing that as a saving, or are we classing it as a reduction of sort of frontline delivery service?
Yeah, I guess because there will be less capacity in the heart team, service users may have to have a different type of care. Whilst so the principle of the heart team is to try and keep service users at home, isn't it? And that is a lower cost form of care. So if there are, I mean, it may be that there's the demand's less at the moment anyway, so it's not causing that capacity issue, or it could be that some of those service users are having to have a different type of care because we haven't got the capacity in the heart team. But that was the purpose really of the efficiency review opportunity, was looking at how we can recruit those posts quicker so that we are able to keep those service users in a lower cost, more independent form of care. So hopefully as the year progresses, we will start to see some of those benefits come through.
And just going back to paragraph 54 now, just on the central items and capital plan. So we've currently got 93 million of external debt that we've still got, but the capital spending budget requires 189 million. So are we planning how we're going to borrow that, where we're going to get it from, and how much that will cost us?
Which paragraph are you referring to there?
54.
Yeah, so again, there's a couple of things going on there. So the external debt is now 93 million. But what that is saying is we've got a requirement to fund historic capital spend of 189 million. The difference though is we were able to borrow that internally from our cash balances rather than needing to externally borrow it. So that is historic, but it's not future spend, it's historic spend that we were funding through that external borrowing. And what we said, we've repaid the external debt, but we still need to fund that historic spend, but we'll do it through our internal cash balances instead.
So you're sort of losing interest on the cash. So
yeah.
So how much is that cost? How much are we losing by doing that?
So obviously interest rates vary, but we have been getting probably 4 to 5% at the moment. But of course, we'll be saving external interest costs on that borrowing that we've repaid, which I think some of the early debt repaid, I think, was 8-9%, just to give you some comparison.
Okay, moving on to paragraph 70 now. This was really concerning when I picked this up about we've got lower grants from the DFE to provide school places, which is a statutory duty for us. So are we sort of heading to a crisis in school placements? Obviously, we know how much development's going on, how many new schools we need, extensions to schools. Obviously, we've got the SEND programme ongoing. So where are we going to get the money from to build these school places that we have a statutory duty to make sure we've got enough school places for all the children that live in Leicestershire currently? And when I read that, my first word was, God, we're going to hit a crisis here at some point.
And I think that, unfortunately, I think it was last summer, the DFE changed their methodology for how they allocate the school places grant, and we lost out significantly through that change methodology, which I think is something we have kind of lobbied against since, but the DFE haven't made any changes. So unfortunately, that has put us in a difficult position in terms of that lost grant. What we're doing at the moment is kind of reviewing available 106 balances and also looking at our future 106 policies to make sure we maximise available 106 funding for those future school places, and also looking at how we make sure the costs of those new places are as efficient as possible, whether that's by looking at the type of construction, the type of school building that we've got, or whether extension of existing schools are better than new school build, for instance. So it is going to be a challenge, I think, and it is something that we will need to, I think, come back with more information in the December budget report. But as I said, unfortunately, it has been driven by the DfE changing their grant methodology, as well as other factors like increasing inflation on construction projects. But there is quite a lot of work going on with the service at the moment to try and mitigate those pressures as much as possible in some of those ways I've just mentioned.
So is there a likelihood we'll externally have to borrow to do this?
There is a risk of a further further call on council funding, certainly in terms of the level. We're still working that through. We will look at other options first, though. So as I've said, we are looking at all of our available 106 funding, for instance. It may be that we look at our asset disposal programme to try and generate some more capital receipts. So there are lots of options that we're currently looking at, but there will be some more information, I think, in the December report on this.
I've nearly finished, then I'll come back to you. Just on paragraph 89 there, I don't know if you can answer this because it's more of a political kind of question here, just about sort of tenants within the county hall. Obviously, the administrator wanted to get everyone back in the office 100% of the time. I'm presuming that didn't happen, because what's telling me here is that we're still getting the same sort of money. So obviously we haven't, asked tenants to leave. Are we planning to do that, or is this still going to give us the funding that we've got from our estate, especially here in County Hall? If you can't answer that, then we'll have to take it back.
So we haven't served notice on any tenants. I suppose it's important to remember, for go back sort of pre-COVID, even back then we had sort of tenants in the estate, and we had sort of vacancies as well. So there's quite a bit of sort of flex as an organisation we can do before we'd need to hit that point. As the report touches on, we have had a tenant who served notice on us, so that's going to change the dynamic a bit as it's moved the kind of, in some ways, the onus away from us to worry about filling the space, to actually we've got a bit more space than we need at the moment. So there's no intention at the moment to serve notice.
So the tenant that's given notice, we're not going to use that space to get everyone back in the office 100%. It's going to be relet to another tenant, or look to relet that area space.
We'll have to work it through, because obviously got LGR looming as well, and what happens there. So it's kind of, which obviously kind of constricts the sort of the amount of time you're prepared to rent out for. So it's being looked at the moment what we're doing with the overall site, because there's a few other bits and pieces that sort of that can move around at the moment. But at the moment, it's probably fair to say we're not actively marketing to somebody new. If something came up, we'd look at it. But with LGR, it feels difficult at the moment to get a long-term lease.
Okay, this is my last one, and you probably can't answer this. It will be a political one, so I might have to take it back. But a lot of what I read in this report is that we have a lot of vacancies, and I'm just concerned that that's reducing our services to residents, because most of what we talk about here that we've already spoke about is frontline service and delivery, and everything I read through here was we've got vacancies. So I'm just worried that we're not attracting the staff that we need to deliver our services, and what we're doing about that. It's probably not one you can answer, but we probably do need to take that one back, because I think it is quite concerning. It's a golden thread all through this report here.
It's one of those, recruiting to local government has been tough for years, and certain areas of the organisation find it harder than others. So you're right, it's kind of across all departments. There's areas each department have got where the service struggles to recruit. I don't think it's any worse than it maybe has been over the last few years, but then it does change on which area you're suffering on the most.
Okay, you'll be pleased to know that's the end of mine. Sorry, was it Mr. Piper? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just as an aside to yourself about recruiting, I being double hatted now, I also know that they're struggling with Harborough recruiting, and I wonder whether part of that is the uncertainty of LGR, and people don't know how long they're going to be employed for. But my question was to you, Simone. You mentioned there a number of times Section 106 money. Now, as I understand it, and I don't fully understand it, 106 is being changed to CIF or something. And will that change make a difference to your ability to get funding for things like schools? Thank you.
My understanding is there will still be provision in the 106 regulations for for the county council to take 106 contributions for school places. It's not necessarily my area of expertise, but I think certainly the future forecast is still that we will have those 106s in the future.
Any other questions from members? Mr. Poland.
Thank you. Yeah, just to follow on really about the staff question, and I know we've spoken in the past outside here when we said that actually we don't think that LGR, and please do correct me if I'm wrong on the LGR hasn't had a noticeable impact on our ability to recruit versus any other time. If for new staff coming in now, do we give them, I don't know, fixed term contracts? Because obviously we've got 18 months left. Do we give them permanent contracts? Although obviously it's still 18 months. Would that then have any impact in terms of potential redundancy? I'm just trying to understand, because I'll be honest, it would be a factor for me if I was looking at a job and I would go in, am I going to be in work after the 1st of April in 2028? So I'm just wondering whether, sort of, how do we deal with that as an organisation, and is there any evidence that that's sort of impacting on recruitment versus at any other time?
It's a hard one to know. People definitely did talk about quite a bit as a risk. I think it's helped by the fact that all our surrounding counties and cities are sort of in the same boat, as it were. So, you know, where if you don't fancy the look of LGR, or where you're going to go, I think it probably has created a bit of stickiness with people that sort of, you know, you sort of stay with the organisation, you know. But then on the flip side, that means your attrition rates are a little bit lower here. So I think it can be a little bit of a wash. In terms of the question about using fixed term contracts, it can make it harder to recruit. And if you've got the confidence that the service is going to be sort of carrying on, particularly on that sort of frontline sort of side of things, you know, there's, I don't know, take household waste sites, they're still going to be there and exist. It might be a different council that runs them, but you still need the staff. So as a whole on the front line, people will still be going sort of like for the same, for sort of permanent contracts, and those contracts will naturally kind of cheap you over to the sort of the new organisation. So there shouldn't be any sort of more or less at risk of redundancy. It's a little bit different on some of the areas that may be targeted for sort of savings as sort of organisations amalgamate, but it's probably a bit early yet to restrict the recruitment, partly because it's kind of across organisations. You know, it's us, the city, the districts, Rutland as well. So at the moment, it's kind of very similar to what we're doing, but it will be an increasing conversation about, do we need to manage things in a different way?
Okay, Mr. King and Dr. North, and I'm going to draw this to a close.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Just if I can, got 2-3 points. So if I was coming back to the vacancies, a lot of these are in social care, and when linking this back to the Newton efficiency review, a lot of the service redesigns were predicated on recruiting additional staff for the prevention agenda, or for basically, you know, helping support people at home, and instead of them needing expensive institutional care. So if we're already struggling to recruit staff in some of these areas, which are designed to, they exist to support, to do that very thing, we're already struggling to recruit those people. My question then is, how are we going to, that then to me draws a big question mark over the deliverability of some of the significant efficiency review savings that were being postulated a few months ago. So that's point number one. Second point is coming back to the school situation, and you know, Simone, you talk about S106. Now, as I understand, we've got there are around there are about 10 school schemes in the capital programme, or forward capital programme at the moment, that might need additional funding. And okay, I know some of that will be funded by S106, but I suppose the question is, a lot of this I suspect is wrapped up with LGR as well, but those schools have been required and they've got consent and they're part of the approval schemes of whatever's been required. So is there a risk that any of these schemes might actually be mothballed and actually not actually happen because of the lack of availability of funding, and also because of the LGR situation, if there isn't sufficient funding going to be available? That would be very, very concerning if that was the case. And the final point I had was I've just lost my train there. Sorry, just those 2 points. Thank you, Chair.
So I guess in terms of that, the risk that school places don't happen, I think we still have a statutory risk, a statutory responsibility to provide those places. So I think that therefore gives the council that challenge of how to reflect that in the MTFS, and it may be a case of prioritisation in the capital programme. but also we have a duty to make sure they're done in the most cost effective way. Hence why we are looking at the moment about how best to provide those places, and whether it is it new schools, is it expansions, is it something else. We are also reviewing those schemes in the light of LGR as well, in terms of what the impact of LGR will be on where those new schools fall. Hence why there's a lot of work going on in the background, and there will be a fuller update at the next meeting. So after that, I think was there anything else?
Just come back to the efficiency review and the vacancy. So we've already got vacancies in a lot of social care roles, and some of those social care roles were identified as being quite important in helping deliver additional efficiencies in the Newton review, service redesigns, etc., prevention, rather than people going into institutional care. So if we can't already recruit these people, how the heck are we going to recruit them in the future? I mean, that's my question. I know you perhaps can't answer that, but it does raise a question mark about how deliverable are the service redesigns that were talked about in the efficiency review.
I suppose the requirement on the efficiency review comes in sort of 2 parts. You've got the implementation savings and the ongoing sort of service change and prevention being a good example of that. So the upfront stuff, although you kind of can try and do it internally, we have to go to the sort of the agency market for that. We will do, just to provide that sort of initial uplift in resource, and that's kind of fairly standard. The point you touch on, which I guess is more at the heart of your question, is those ongoing services. We're going to do a bit more preventative activities. There's a mini service there to provide that preventative intervention. I think with all of them, when you look across it, if they, at the heart of them is a reduction in ongoing demand. So actually, if we can get these ones right, it can help that future kind of recruitment position as well, because it's actually, if you've got less sort of service users, or service users are in less high need kind of interventions, your staffing requirements are a bit less. So if it hopefully if we get it right, it is a bit more of a sort of a moving around. It might mean we need some extra resource, but it's probably worth it in terms of that long-term kind of vacancy recruitment type picture. But it will be a risk, as members have said, and I've said, it is difficult recruiting into local government, and there's going to be times where we just have to prioritise where the effort goes, because it has more of an impact, more of a benefit for service users. But it will be something on the risk register of some of these projects as they go forward.
Okay, I'll take Dr. North and then we'll draw us to a close.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. King already asked some of my questions around the 10 schools. I think probably the end point that he forgot was actually around the financial status of that. So it's weighed up that 10 further schools may require additional funding, but do we have an estimated amount or cost of that, and when will we be able to see that quantified, please? Is just part of the first.
No, not yet. It's something the service and finance are working on at the moment. We will bring a draft budget report and MTFS refresh to Cabinet in December, and then it comes to scrutiny afterwards. So that's when we would hope to have a more sort of confirmed position.
Thank you, Simone. I'll look forward to that then. Can I just say as well, we're not here to scrutinise efficiency. We're here to scrutinise the MTFS. And I think the vacancies, as my colleagues rightly pointed out, seem to be a recurring theme. And maybe that's something as well that could be brought forward. Maybe you could get some more stats and statistics around that, how that's having an impact on MTFS with those vacancies. Because as a council, our efficiency is how well we're doing a service. And if we don't have someone providing that service, if that's a vacant issue and that's causing a backlash on the whole service, we need to know that information. So is it possible that it could be highlighted a bit better to us so we could understand the impact of those vacancies?
I can draw it out if there's a sort of an obvious impact, but it's probably more the sort of the individual scrutiny commissions will pick that up if there's an actual sort of detrimental impact on the services, because then they've got a bit more of an informed discussion. You'll have the right sort of officers along to support that. So it's probably more the individual scrutiny commissions who pick that up.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Thank you for both of you. And my apologies again for some very tough questions, but I'm afraid you've been left without any political support there. So it's not good for us, to be honest. So on to item 10, Investing in Leicestershire Programmes Annual Performance Update, pages 31 to 66. Lucy Littlefair, Assistant Director of Corporate Resources, will present this item, supported by Karen Fearson, Head of Strategic Property Services. And again, Mr. Howler was due to be here for this item, but is not here. So when you're settled, Lucy, I'll let you introduce this.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just to let you know, so as you say, we've been joined by Karen, is our Head of Strategic Property, and Bulesh, who is our Strategic Finance Manager. I think given the kind of joint nature of the ILP programme, having finance and property colleagues here is helpful, and obviously Declan. Okay, so the Commission will see that you've been provided with a detailed report setting out the performance of the Investing in Leicestershire programme for 2025-2026, as well as a cover report which summarises its content. I'd just like really to draw your attention to the following aspects of the performance of the programme, and then, yeah, more than happy to take any questions. So the report confirms that the total value of the portfolio as at 31st of March 2026 was 280.1 million. And this comprises of the direct property portfolio, which is 226.7 million, and our diversifier investments, which stands at 53.4 million. So the direct property portfolio is made up of land and buildings owned by the council, including the rural estate, our commercial estate, which is largely our offices and our industrial properties, and our development sites. Our diversifier investments are investments which are held outside the council's direct owned property portfolio, such as pooled property, infrastructure, private debt, and bank risk share funds, which are all intended to spread risk and provide income from sources other than property. And that balance is important because income from the programme helps support council services. Having both direct property and diversifier investments enables the council to continue benefiting from its land and property assets, whilst also reducing the risk that performance is too dependent on one market or asset type. So during 25-26, the overall capital value of the programme reduced by 12.2 million. The report explains that this reduction was not the result of a single issue, but reflected a combination of factors. These included valuation reductions in parts of the direct property portfolio, particularly the rural estate and office assets, the impact of sales and transfers during the year, and the planned return of capital from some of our diversifier investments. The reduction in the rural estate valuation by 8.6 million was especially significant and is explained in the report as being linked to a change in valuation approach, with external valuers no longer including some potential future development value, as well as wider market conditions. However, it is worth noting that the property values can fluctuate from year to year, and over the longer term, the rural estate has delivered sustained growth, averaging 10% per annum over the past 5 years. So although the capital valuation reduced in year, the programme continued to deliver important financial benefits. The report sets out that the net income for 25-26 was 8.6 million, providing support ultimately to council services. And operational performance was also positive, with 20 new lettings completed, adding a further £466,000 per annum to the rental income. There are also a number of positive management indicators. Our 90-day debt reduced and stood at 631,000 at the year end, which is equivalent to 6.6% of the gross portfolio income and below the 10% target. And our average voids across the portfolio was 7.9%, which again was below the target of 8.9%. Rent reviews and lease renewals, which are just part of our kind of day-to-day business as usual, continue to be progressed, helping to protect and manage income across the portfolio. And in terms of our wide strategic progress, the programme has also supported the future development pipeline through progress on local plan allocations and the rural estate strategy, which has now been adopted and implementation has begun. The report also explains the position on our diversifier investments. These are intended to spread risk and provide income from sources, as I've said, other than our direct property. And the current split is 81% direct property and 19% diversifiers, compared with the longer term target recommended by Hymans Robertson, actually of 2/3 direct property and 1/3 diversifiers. So the intention is to rebalance the portfolio over the medium term, including proposals to acquire additional diversifier investments in the current year. This remains important because the income from the programme is relied on to supplement service provision, so it's prudent to ensure that risk is not overly concentrated in one part of the portfolio. Members should also note that the performance comparison for 25-26 is affected by a one-off timing issue. The programme has returned to valuing the portfolio as of the 31st of March each year, rather than the 1st of October. This means that the valuation movement in this report covers an 18-month period rather than the usual 12 months, and is therefore not directly comparable with the 12-month market benchmark. And future annual valuations will now be aligned to the 31st of March. The full report also highlights positive activity across the portfolio and progress on a number of our key development sites. This included new tenants taking occupation of the refurbished Building 2 at Lichfield and new lettings at Phase 3 of Airfield Business Park following completion of the scheme. New leases were also completed at Colville Business Centre, Loughborough Technology Centre and across the industrial estates, including lettings that enabled existing tenants to expand their operations and continue investing locally. At Leaders Farm South, Lutterworth, part of the site has been developed for roadside food and drink uses following market interest and planning permission. The new drive-through units are now complete, with 2 operators taking possession in June 2026, and it's expected to generate an income of £190,000 per annum. The future development of the remainder of the site has been reviewed with interest identified for light industrial and distribution use, although this would require planning permission as a departure from the current local plan. For Lutterworth East, the report explains that the project team is continuing to progress the scheme towards securing extant consent by May 2027. This will require construction of the highway entrance to the proposed strategic employment area, discharge of pre-commencement planning conditions, and payment of the related 106 contributions. As would be expected for a development of this scale and complexity, updated viability and delivery planning is currently being carried out. This includes reviewing infrastructure requirements, the phasing of the programme, market demand and funding assumptions to ensure that the delivery strategy remains current and reflects changing market conditions. We've also been looking at opportunities to work with external partners, particularly Homes England, and these have been explored so that it can help support delivery, address infrastructure or funding requirements, and overall strengthen the route to implementation. At west of Stony Stanton, works continue to promote 103 acres of County Council land as part of a wider residential-led mixed-use development of up to 5,000 homes. The scheme has been included as a proposed allocation in the Regulation 19 pre-submission draft of the emerging Blaby District Local Plan, with an outline planning application expected to be submitted in December 2026. Progress during the year has included work on the Link Road option agreement, transport modelling, the master plan, infrastructure cost planning, viability appraisal, and ongoing engagement with Blaby District Council, local parish councils and other stakeholders. Looking ahead, the MTFS includes capital provision of 48 million, together with 4 million from Treasury management balances for additional investments to support the programme's growth towards the 260 million investment target. The exact level of investment will obviously depend on the availability of suitable opportunities, development costs and funding. So in summary, while the report shows an in-year reduction in capital value, this is largely explained by valuation movements and timing factors. The programme has continued to generate significant income, and the long-term strategy remains focused on prudent growth, risk management and continued support for council services. So with that introduction, Chairman, I invite the Commission to consider the performance of the programme, provide any views and comments it wishes to be reported to Cabinet.
Thank you, Lucy. One of my first questions was that decrease in value, but I think you've explained that really well. I question was, is this a concern? But I'm taking it from what you've said that it's not a concern. So I'm reassured by what you've said. So thank you for that. Mr. Poland, you were first.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting to me, sort of obviously the income and then the value of the properties. The value of office properties, as the report, has fallen. Obviously, we let some of that out, and we've had that sort of discussion before. But in offices that we ourselves actually use, is that basically just a paper cost? Because obviously we don't get rental income from ourselves. So is it just an on paper fall in value rather than something that actually affects our finances overall? And then in terms of that's the first question. And I guess the second part of that is, this is just me trying to understand how the valuation works. Obviously, the nature of some of our farmland will be whatever it is. But do we include in that things like the Bosworth battlefield? And if so, how do you value that? Do you value it as a field? Do you value it as a national important asset? And do you see what I mean? So I'm just curious as to see how that works. But again, I guess a lot of these, we're never going to sell the Bosworth battlefield. So again, I guess it's an on paper thing rather than something that's actually affecting our finances in reality.
Yeah, so just on the offices question, so as you'll note, a more cautious approach has been taken to the evaluation of some of the office portfolio. So, for example, we've got an office investment at Embankment in Nottingham. We do have a couple of leases that are due to terminate, and we're in the process of trying to relet those at the moment. At the moment, it's kind of regional non-prime office accommodation, so a cautious approach has been taken to the valuation there. That's inevitable, I'm afraid. In terms of the offices here, we've the accommodation, the sublet property element of it has remained relatively constant. We've had some people serve notice, we've had some people wanting to switch, from location A to B within the county hall environment. So there's a few discussions ongoing, and as Declan referred to in the MTFS piece, we just need to be a bit cognizant of what we might need in terms of LGR as well. And ultimately, it's down to what any incoming tenants, particularly in the county hall space, might be prepared to sign up to. Or are they going to be, when it comes to it, are they going to be prepared to sign up, for example, beyond April, 28? I mean, to be honest, in theory, they should be, because whoever the landlord is the landlord, and it will just transfer across. So, but all the details surrounding that needs to be worked out over the next sort of 15 months.
I'm back on that point. Yeah. So again, it might be a simple question, but just to help me understand. So if the building, not thinking so much here, but elsewhere, maybe Bankment House or wherever it is in Nottingham, if the value of the building is less, therefore we would charge a new tenant less rent. Is that the case, or do we charge?
Not necessarily. We will always try and maximise the rental value.
Yeah.
But it's open to local market conditions at the end of the day.
Got you. Got you. Okay. And then in terms of, sorry.
I'm wondering with the question, what you're trying to ask is why across some of the offices has the valuation decreased? And I think the paper refers to the fact that because we know we've got some of the tenants to a certain extent who are leaving, who may have given us notice, that does impact on the valuation, because obviously, potentially, if you were going to sell that, you may well be selling it with a sitting tenant. Karen, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, so ultimately, if we're going to look to sell an investment, my recommendation would be that we have it as full as possible with tenants, even if, for argument's sake, we had to take a slightly lower rental than we would otherwise have liked. But if the aim was to divest of the investment and you were going to put it on the market, you would want to put it on the market with the largest income stream possible to then realise the highest capital value. very quickly.
So that's interesting. Okay, so that makes sense for the offices elsewhere that are offices and we've bought them as investments. In terms of here, I guess the question, maybe a comment would be, if we're signing tenants up to anything longer than 18 months from today, we would necessarily be tying the hands of our successors, whoever takes over this place, who might want to use it for themselves. They might want to sell it and turn it into housing. There could be any number of things they want to do with it, but clearly, whatever we do today would impact them, I guess. And just again, pure curiosity, how do we value farmland and heritage assets as well?
So just continuing on the office question. So at the moment, we're very much business as usual until we get to the shadow cabinet in April 27, and then significant acquisition disposals will have to be then considered in a slightly different way. So we will try to continue as business as usual. Obviously, it will get increasingly more challenging as we get towards the date of the shadow cabinet and then the vesting date. I mean, heritage assets are a specialist valuation asset, to be honest. So we've got offices, we've got industrial, we've got heritage, we've got all sorts of different property assets, and they will all be valued in different ways.
Mr. King?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I just need to declare, because it is in my members' interest, but just for clarity, I am Deputy Leader at Harbour District Council, which is the planning authority for Lutterworth East. So, but I'm not going to ask any questions about that. You'd be pleased to know today. I'll save those for another time. But the question I wanted to ask, so was about this diversification. The target is 67, 30, is a 2/3, a third, but we're still at 80-20 or thereabouts. Are we making any progress towards this? Or and then just on top of that, just go back to the LGR thing. I mean, obviously this is an investment fund. Not all of it's in Leicestershire, as we've heard. Some of it is other places. So it's a bit of a misnomer in the label. But anyway, I get the point. But the point I want to make is how, and you mentioned it yourself, at some point, assuming the shadow authority comes into being next year, and after that there'll be the vesting date, 1st of April 2028. How's this going to be chopped up then? Because or is that going to be a bit of a bun fight between the two new authorities? And am I right in thinking that's a political bun fight rather than an officer bun fight? I mean, not literally, no one's going to fight about it, I'm sure, but I'm just trying to understand. How's this going to? I mean, I appreciate we might be getting ahead of ourselves, but these are important things. Big assets involved. Certainly a lot of land in some places, and based on what I know about some of that it would definitely be going into, will be certainly part of the new Leicester Council area. So what does that mean? You're talking about investing £52 million over the next 4 years. How are we going to be able to invest that if we're kind of potentially losing, I can put it like this, a lot of the assets that underpin this investing in Leicestershire programme? So just over to you. Thank you.
You're right on a couple of points you say. It's quite early, and it probably will end up with a political decision whether it's a bun fight. There's probably a fair chance it is. I mean, there's Northamptonshire have only just settled some of their sort of debt kind of disaggregation, and they unitarised quite a long time ago. So people naturally look at geography, but that doesn't always follow, because obviously County Hall is going to be the new city boundary. Now, the new authority is going to really struggle to function on day one if it gets turfed out of a building. So I don't think geography can necessarily be taken as a sort of determinant. This is definitely how assets get split. And your question was around the investing in Leicestershire programme. If you take the rural estate is a good example there, where it's a reasonable size rural estate we've got as a county council. It's not particularly huge in the scheme of things, but it's a reasonable size. But if you start carving bits off, suddenly as an overall sort of an estate management point of view, it starts to wobble a bit. It doesn't look as sort of as coherent. So obviously, sort of when officers put the recommendations to sort of the political sort of approval process, that'll be one of the considerations. Obviously, we're going to be putting forward that it probably makes sense to keep things like the rural estate together, so it functions as an estate. So you've got more options, because, like I say, it's not a big estate in the scheme of things. So I think there's going to be an awful lot of, we'll have to see how it goes. But one of the big arguments will be, if it's about kind of continuity of services, that should have quite a lot of prominence in that, rather than just an accounting exercise to divvy things up sort of on a population basis or something like that.
Mr. Innes.
Thank you, Chair. Your first question wasn't answered about the diversification of the portfolios. I was going to ask the same thing. How long has this target been in place, please? And how are we so far away from it? Because I guess prior to the property devaluation, the mismatch was even greater. I guess it was probably in the high 80% was property. So I'm interested, I guess, 3 questions. Who's agreed the target? How long has it been in place? And why are we so far away from it?
I'll take that one. So that target has been in place since early 2024. Hymans Robertson, an external consultant, gave us those targets. And at that point, we're relatively close to those targets. What's happened since is that we've had fairly large increases in our direct property portfolio valuation. So rural was circa 30 million a number of years ago. It's worth about 80 something now. So as you can see, that would take us further away. And in the current year, we've had about £7 million worth of capital returned to us for the diversifier. So again, that takes us further away. We are awaiting a new strategy review, and that will let us know what the optimal split should be and where we should then invest.
Okay, Mr. Piper.
Thank you, Chair. 2 things. Following on from the last comment about the diversity, one of the things which I believe a colleague of mine has mentioned, John Bloxham, before, is that part of the diversity fund reinvests in property, albeit pooled property. Surely if it was a true diversity fund, it should be in anything but property. The other thing is that, coming back to the point that Councillor King made there about splitting up the it's almost like the family squabbling over the will, isn't it? If we've already got investments which are outside Leicestershire, is there any necessary demand that we must hand over investments that will be in the new city boundaries? Or will that just be down to the desire of the new city council? Thank you.
And he's wrapped that. I mean, you've used one of the arguments we'll probably try and use about, if something's there and it's working and it's coherent, why do you break it up? Because there's not to your point, there's not a legal impediment to doing it. The city council probably look at it through a different lens about kind of what things actually might they quite like to have within their stake. So I think it is going to have to be a bit of a sort of a back and forth on that. In terms of the diversifiers, you don't disagree. There is the property skew. That was a conscious choice at the time. Before there was any sort of expansion of the kind of the directly owned stuff. The pooled properties was the first one to almost make a bit of a start. There was obviously we haven't reinvested anything in the pooled property. And we've been, the intention was always to sort of gradually came out. It hasn't quite happened as we expected because of some of the things that happened in the market and sort of some forced redemptions on funds. But to your point, there was always that desire to sort of reduce the diversification of the pooled property assets provided through having different asset classes we wouldn't touch on a sort of a self-build basis or sort of a geographic spread as well, and just build up into other ones. It's just kind of that just takes a while to happen.
Okay, just a few points from me. First one is in paragraph 22 about the 631k debt. So I presume that's from rent that's not paid, is what I presume. You're often telling us to split the rural farms and the offices apart and stuff like that. So is this the whole lot? And have we got more debt from offices? Have we got more debt from farms? Where's our debt sitting and what are we doing about it?
So that 631 you talk about is spread across all asset classes. So from the direct property portfolio, and we can get the split out to you. I don't have it at hand.
That'd be great if you can email it in. My second one is paragraph 28, where it's put the capital provision of £48. I presume that's a typo. Can you just clarify? Should that be 448 million? Right, okay, thank you. That just needs correcting. I am going to mention Lutterworth East. You mentioned there about the viability is going to be reassessed. Obviously, we've been here before and struggled with, making alterations. Are we at risk of watering down the scheme even more? What's the risk of the viability? We're going to lose the whole site. Where are we in what you think the viability is going to come out of that site?
Truth of the viability it's a periodic process. We always kind of do the viability, see what is still attractive to the market about the scheme, and sort of change the elements that maybe aren't. An example that was it's quite a sort of straightforward example. When the scheme was first designed, there was 3 areas that were going to have offices on there. At the moment, they're valued at sort of next to nothing because there isn't demand for offices. So it's a bit more of a case of kind of you take stock about what the viability says, where the market is, and then you replan. And obviously, kind of there's alternative options. It's not always about kind of watering down the scheme. Lucy touched on conversations with Homes England. Homes England don't come along to viable schemes. They come along to sort of either unviable schemes or schemes where they want to increase the level of affordable housing. So that's always the kind of the options there as well. But it is a case of just natural process having a big development like this. You reassess where you are, you replan, you try and take actions to improve the scheme, then you try and get a bit more of it away, and then you go through that circle again.
Thank you. My final point's on page 58, the chart there, the performance indicator and description. Would that be more helpful if that was RAG rated? Because it's all very green, but most of it is missing the targets, how I read that. It'd just be clearer if it was RAG rated, if we're hitting targets or not.
Yeah, just got to that in the report. Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, we can put the RAG rate.
Because it's green and you ought to change it to a different, do
Different
something.
colour, yes.
Yeah, because it looks like everything's performing really well, but when you actually read it, it's not. So just some feedback.
Yeah, point noted.
Mr. Piper.
Sorry, Jay, you actually prompted my memory. When we're talking about the debts, I have a resident in my district who is a tenant farmer of the county, and they pay their rent monthly, but they get bills, letters saying you haven't paid your rent, you haven't paid your rent, you haven't paid your rent every month, or what, however, because the system seems to be set up for farmers that pay their rent annually in advance. Now, when you've got farmers who are paying monthly or in advance or monthly in arrears, we're wasting officer time and postage, etc., in continually sending out these reminders. Now, of that 631,000 debt, how much of that might actually be wrongly calculated, where people like this farmer have paid them their money, but are getting letters saying they're in arrears? Could some of that arrears appear in that 631,000?
The 631 will show any overdue, as in past 30 days. So to a certain extent, there could be a small amount that's in for anybody that's, that just for that particular month. I'll have a conversation with our colleagues in East Midlands Shared Services about the process, just to investigate why some of our tenants, particularly farming tenants, might be getting such letters yet. And find out. Yeah, as you say, it would feel like an administrative waste of time if that is the case. Yeah.
If you want to email Lucy out of the meeting with the details, she'll be able to track it down and double check for you.
Yes, I was going to offer that, Chair. Thank you very much.
Dr. North.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the asset management, I need to ask, because there's been a significant fall in asset management KPIs achieved. So it's gone down from 67% to 52%, I believe. Just wondered, is that acceptable? Is that is that part of your KPIs? And then what's forecasted for 26, 27, please?
Can we ask where you're looking on the reports?
Apologies, it's been a long morning already.
Okay. So any more questions on item 10? No? Okay, thank you very much. So on to item 11, the Corporate Asset Management Plan Annual Performance Report, 67 to 84. And again, Lucy, you are leading us through this, being supported by Karen. Yep. Okay, thank you, Rulesh. And again, Mr. Fowler was due here, but he isn't. So over to you to introduce, and Lucy, please.
Okay, thank you. So the Commission will see that you've been provided with a detailed report setting out performance against the Corporate Asset Management Plan during 25-26, changes in strategy and the programme of work for 2026-27. Views and comments of the Commission are sought on the performance achieved and the proposed action plan. I'd like to draw your attention to the following aspects of the report. So as you'll be aware, the Council's property portfolio is a significant corporate resource. It supports the delivery of services and contributes to the Council's financial resilience. As at March 2026, the portfolio comprised of 710 freehold and leasehold assets with a combined value of 521 million. The portfolio includes the operational corporate landlord estate and the Investing in Leicestershire programme that we've just discussed. These are held for different purposes. The corporate assets support service delivery and must remain safe, compliant, affordable and fit for purpose, whilst our Investing in Leicestershire portfolio is principally managed to generate income and capital growth. The number of assets overall reduced by 6 during the year from 716 to 710, while the total portfolio value increased by £2 million, with our Investing in Leicestershire portfolio remaining the single largest element. The Council's 4-year capital programme totals 501 million, and projects valued at 156 million require property input, including school place provision, investment property and major infrastructure. In 2026-2027, property-related projects represent 49% of the programme, with a value of 66 million, just giving you a sense of the kind of scale of the work the property colleagues are involved in. Maintenance remains an important area of focus. During 25-26, 3.3 million was spent through the Central Maintenance Fund, with a further 1 million invested in condition improvement works. And we've given the examples, for example, the removal of the chimneys at Bowman, some structural work that we needed to do at Anstey Frith House. Planned maintenance represents 60% of expenditure, compared with 40% on reactive work. We've set out what we believe our estimated future liability for essential maintenance, repair and compliance works to be, and that's increased by 2.7 million to 53.8 million, which ultimately just reflects the continued construction sector inflation. Of this, 1.8 million falls within the most urgent category and requires attention within the next 12 months. There was some positive progress against several strategic objectives. We got capital receipts in of 6.9 million, exceeding the £6 million £6 million target that we set ourselves at the beginning of the year. And the corporate landlord and the Investing in Leicestershire portfolios generated 9.5 million in gross income, and ratings challenges generated 1.4 million pounds of savings over the contract period. 25-26 schools capital programme was delivered in full, with the Hastings High School, Ivenshead Secondary School and Birchwood Special School schemes completed on schedule. And across the wider property capital programme, 15 of the 25 projects or properties phases during the year were completed on schedule. And it'd be fair to say that the remaining 10 schemes continue to either be actively managed and are expected to remain within the approved budgets. And it comes just down to a kind of a phasing of those, and some of those taking either longer or actually we've deliberately, put them back. 14 property reviews and strategy updates were programmed for the year, of which 8 were completed. The remaining 6 are continuing, with the report confirming that the revised timescales are not expected to affect service outcomes. Some of those related to kind of our SEEPs and SEND provision. So property colleagues work really closely with the services and were kind of aligned, to their timescales, which is why sometimes we kind of miss those KPIs. Overall performance indicator position is mixed. Of the 25 indicators assessed, 52% were achieved compared with 67% in the previous year. This was largely influenced by the performance of the Investing in Leicestershire portfolio in a constrained market, while the corporate landlord estate showed improvement in condition, urgent maintenance and the proportion of planned work. Environmental performance was positive overall. Our total energy use reduced by 11% and energy expenditure reduced by 29% in real terms. Water usage was the only environmental indicator not achieved, and some of that was due to a change in supplier. The annual asset challenge reviewed property in the Blaby district and Melton Borough. It identified assets for retention, improvement, further review or disposal, and viable opportunities already being marketed or declared surplus, and potential with an estimated value of £10.4 million. Next asset challenge will consider the wider portfolio to support preparations for local government reorganisation. More broadly, the camp will need to evolve as future asset ownership responsibilities and portfolio strategy becomes clearer, as we've discussed this morning. The report also reflects the Better Leicestershire work on optimising our estate. This identified opportunities to improve income, reduce operating costs, make better use of buildings and support future-based, locality-based service planning. And these themes will now be taken forward through the 26-27 action plan. That action plan is structured around three areas: the delivery of property-related capital projects, reviews and development of future property strategies, and the ongoing management of the estate. It also includes work to support local government reorganisation. In summary, the report demonstrates the estate continues to support essential services and the council's financial position, with some positive delivery in some areas. It also highlights the pressures created by construction inflation, maintenance liabilities and mixed investment performance. The forward programme therefore maintains a clear focus on safety and compliance, planned maintenance, value for money, better use of assets and preparation for future organisational change. So with that introduction, Chair, I invite the Commission to consider the performance and provide any comments it wishes.
Thank you, Lucy. Dr. North, do you want to ask your question?
Thank you. I've almost forgotten what it was now as well. Thanks so much for that information, Lucy. That was really informative. So we've got 52% of 25 performance indicators, and that's down from 67%. I mean, that seems really large to me. Can I ask a bit around the how, the why, and thank you.
Yeah, I think probably I alluded to a little bit in my introduction, in that it was very much kind of a mixed performance across the board, but those performance indicators are wider across the investment portfolio, as well as our corporate landlord performing anything from energy KPIs, to various different projects and schemes that property colleagues may be involved in, some of which the delivery can sometimes be out of our control, in that we might be relying, for example, on a department actually to define its strategy before we're then able to kind of step in relation to what are the kind of property aspects of it. So in terms of the overall performance, that indicators that they're varied across the kind of various different aspects of owning such a large property portfolio. And unfortunately, this year we haven't performed as well as we could have done.
Thank you for that. I totally respect what you're saying, and it makes sense. And it's like my leader needs to set his strategy so I can then set mine, and then we can correlate and understand each other's. But something went wrong for it to be that much of a dip, and I totally appreciate with the energy factors. Is 52% acceptable? And where are you looking to improve it? And I hope it's an improvement for next year.
I think some of it is also around kind of what those indicators, if you like, some of those include, as I say, projects and schemes, which would have been included in the action plan last year, which then potentially, decisions were made as an organisation. So they're not necessarily KPIs in their truest sense in terms of kind of yields, rates of return, all those types of things. They could just be that we thought that we were going to deliver on a particularly strategy, and actually the services dictated that they're no longer to continue. So what might be useful, I think, for the camp going forward is actually split out those performance indicators. So you can really see where we genuinely haven't delivered against a target, or where actually it's just a phasing.
I think that would be really helpful. I think you should really include that. Thank you.
Yeah, just a paragraph doesn't really give us any information, does it? So if we can separate them out going forward, that'd be great. Mr. King.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks, Lucy, for your overview of the corporate asset management plan. I was going to ask that question, but got in there. So what I wanted to just focus on a bit is about maintenance liabilities. Now, reading the report, they seem to have increased by just under 3 million in the last year to 53.8 million. Now, I understand only 1.8 million is what's classed as priority one work, which it says in the report requires to be done within 12 months. But in terms of the other nearly 52 million then, maintenance liability, how much of that is funded, and when are we going to get it done, whatever those maintenance liabilities are? Because if they've been identified as being required and needed for service operational needs or whatever it is, then surely we should be cracking on and getting them done. I appreciate there's a timing to all these things and everything, so I'm just trying to understand that. And secondly, the priority one, the 1.8 million, will that be completed within the required 12 months? Thank you.
I can give you a sense of the types of things that we've got, in the kind of priority one. Everything from kind of boiler replacement program to, putting the chimneys back up at Bow Manor. We've got some windows replacement, Bassett Centre. It's those types of things that we've got scheduled, I guess, in terms of P1. In terms of funding going forward,
I suppose it's another ease. It's a planning activity. So you're looking ahead roughly 5 years. What in the next 5 years is going to need, or potentially need work. So before you instigate the maintenance, you do tend to kind of keep revisiting that and making sure it really does need it within that timeline, because sometimes things stretch a bit longer. But it also informs things like asset disposals. Has an asset got to the point where it's costing more to maintain it than it's worth? So you avoid some of that maintenance liability with disposal, hence the point of doing it over that sort of 5-year period. So it's probably more of a starting point for action as opposed to a definitive, we're definitely going to sell that, because often you can do different interventions and do things in different ways as well.
So what you're saying to me then is the maintenance plan that we have is kind of just a wish list, really. Is that what I know you haven't used that word, but is it, or are they things that actually need fixing, replacing, whatever, in order for services and facilities to operate in an efficient and safe manner? I'm just trying to understand, why, if we've got them in the MTFS as nearly £54 million worth of maintenance, I'm just getting what you've said is it's not funded necessarily. There isn't funding attached to all of those. Is that have we got the understanding right there?
Yeah, you wouldn't fund all of them, because, like I say, there's other actions that you can take. So it's the best for you at a point in time. But with all maintenance, unless it's sort of needed immediately, you then reassess it closer to the time that you think it's needed and make sure it still is, or whether there's anything else you can do.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So coming back then to how do we, is there like a list of what these maintenance issues, what this program is actually comprised of somewhere, that we, at some point, we can see what it is? Because I've no idea what, okay, I hear what you're saying about chimneys and things, but there must be some big items in there to get to 54.
Our property operations colleagues have a PPM, a Planned Preventative Maintenance Programme, and obviously those that are due to land in years 1 or 2 are more definitive than those for years 3, 4 and 5. and it's a process of continually, inspecting, updating, liaising with colleagues in my strategic property team. If we've got an imminent disposal, would it be worth spending X on a property if we're going to, so it's a bit of a constant juggle and update. And but there is a list of what we are planning to spend
It'll be
where
useful
and
to
when.
understand, Chair, if we could, the scrutiny, I think it would be useful to at least, again, coming back to the LGR question, because if we've got assets or facilities that need tens of millions of pounds spending on them to maintain them, then presumably there's, however it's divvied up, and however long that takes, there's going to be an implication on, successor authorities of which assets do they want to take. If there's I'm assuming none of them have a multi-million liability, but if they did, then that's obviously would put people off potentially wanting to have those assets under their council if there's a significant liability for maintenance, wouldn't it?
Potentially would. I mean, I'd be surprised if County Hall isn't in the multi-millions just because of the size of the estate
No,
and the size. So,
I get that.
But you're right. I mean, LGR is another complication because again, there's at some point there's going to be a consolidation of properties. So again, you'll kind of look to put off maintenance. But you're right. Part of that mix of do I want asset X depends on whether it's truly as an asset or whether it's more of a liability.
Okay. That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Dr. North?
Thank you.
Sorry, did you want to come back in there quickly?
It was okay. I was just going to say on the LGR issue, I am sitting on the thematic group for property assets on behalf of LCC, and my cohorts around the districts and city also sit on that group. And we're just, there's a huge amount of piece of work to work through. We're just in the phase of kind of the no regrets type element of work to sort of set out the basic raw data, and obviously things will progress, as implementation plans come forward. But there's a huge amount of work to work through. But we have got a really good relationship with, all my property cohorts around the district and city that we're working with on a regular basis.
Thank you for that, Dr. North.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to say I absolutely agree with what my colleague, Mr. King, said. I do think sometimes some site of, I know it as a TPM, but PPM also as well. I think some site for that for the committee would be useful, and I can appreciate that is a very changing document as well, and it might be, hey, there's a new grant for this, so we're going to scrap that whole thing and get a whole new equipment and add this. So I absolutely appreciate it changes as well, but maybe just some information in that, just like a brief update. This is it, these are our biggest spends and these are the ones that we're really watching, that might be really useful. I think it links back to the question actually that I wanted to ask your colleague earlier as well, by sometimes defining those assets then, because are those assets still worthwhile? Should we be maintaining them, or should we be replacing or looking at other grants elsewhere? So I think that information would be really useful. Thank you.
Yeah, there comes a point where you have the repair versus replacement conversation as well as part of that overarching PPM piece of work colleagues work on.
Okay. Thank you, members. I've got nothing further to add, so thank you very much, and we'll move on. So on to item 12, the corporate complaints and compliments 25-26. So Lucy, you're remaining with us to deal with this, and Chelsea O'Neill, the corporate complaint and information service manager, is joining us. Welcome, Chelsea. Again, Mr. Fowler was due to be here but isn't for this item yet. So are you introducing Lucy?
Thank you, Chair. Okay. So the report provides scrutiny with an overview of the complaints received and the Council's corporate complaints procedure, together with information on compliments and feedback from the local government and social care ombudsman. It's an important part of our governance arrangements and helps us understand where services are performing well, where residents experience difficulties, and where further improvement is needed. I think at the outset, it's probably important to put the figures into context. You'll all be aware the Council provides a vast range of services to a growing population and manages millions of interactions with residents each year. Complaints therefore represent a very small proportion of overall contact and service delivery within the authority. And additionally, we're seeing a rising trend in the use of artificial intelligence, meaning the Council receives lengthy complaints which can take longer to investigate. Key messages really to kind of get over to: we received 224 stage 1 complaints per 100,000 residents, compared to 210 in 24-25, showing a modest increase, with the majority progressing through the corporate complaints process. We received 1,310 stage 1 corporate complaints, compared with 1,210 in 24-25, again an increase on the previous year, although the complaint volumes remain below the level reported in 2023-2024. So not only have we got kind of, obviously there's a, the increase in average per resident, but also kind of just, the numbers have gone up by 100 year on year. But complaints do remain concentrated within a relatively small number of service areas, particularly special educational needs assessment and transport related services, reflecting the significant demand and complexity seen within these areas nationally. This pattern is consistent with previous years, and both areas continue to progress targeted improvement activity. Our SEND team have reduced the waiting time for issuing EHCPs to within the 20-week requirement, which is well above the national average of 46.1 weeks, meaning we should expect to see less complaints about assessment delays next year. An improvement plan is also in place where the quality and timeliness of annual review completion is monitored closely by the SEND and Inclusion Board. And SEN saw a 9% reduction in stage 1 complaints in 25-26 compared to the previous year. So while stage 1 demand has increased, the report shows that services continue to respond to the vast majority of complaints within the maximum timescales set out in the corporate complaints procedure. 90% of stage 1 complaints were responded to within 40 working days, although we recognise that performance against our shorter target timescale of 10 days has reduced, and there is further work to do to improve responsiveness. Some of that delay is linked to the complexity of the complaints that we're getting through. The report also highlights an increase in stage 2 complaints, with escalation concentrated in, again, those small number of complex, high demand service areas. What we've done as a service is to provide new response templates for support staff to enable them to provide high quality, consistent responses. And we're also looking at how technology can actually assist us in responding to complaints more efficiently and effectively. Importantly, the Ombudsman position shows encouraging signs. Although the number of complaints and inquiries received by the Ombudsman increased, the number of upheld decisions reduced compared with the previous year. The report identifies Ombudsman remedy payments of 37,500 in 25-26, compared with 21,000 in 24-25. Typically, these payments relate to remedies for injustice and misprovision. The Council complied with all Ombudsman recommendations and no public interest reports were issued. This demonstrates our commitment to learning, accountability and continuing improvement. One of the things I'm most pleased to report is that the Council actually received 641 compliments in 25-26, which is a 63% increase on the previous year, representing 248 additional compliments. Cross-services feedback most often highlighted the quality of interactions with staff and volunteers, particularly their kindness, helpfulness, professionalism, clear communication and well-organised service delivery. Positive comments were most evident in our libraries, heritage sites and museums, with further recognition for responsive support in education, adoption registration, environmental services and health-related provision. Council has also introduced compliments QR code to make it easier for residents to share feedback, and we expect to see the benefit of this reflected in future volumes, so we could well see those increases more, and I think it's a huge kind of motivation thing for our staff. So Scrutiny is asked to note the findings of the annual report and provide any comments that you'd like us to take forward to Cabinet.
Thank you. Any comments from anyone? Mr. Innes?
Yeah, I was interested in the upheld complaints figure, and after rereading it, I see. Maybe you could just take me through this process. I see there was 118 cases received, 27 were investigated, 25 upheld. What does that process mean? Because why weren't all 118 investigated? And then when the 27 are pushed forward, how's that decision made?
Yeah, thank you. So the 118 would have been the total volume of inquiries that we'd received. So not everything that we would get would go on for a formal full investigation. So it might be that it was premature. So it gets closed. It doesn't actually make it to investigation stage until we've completed our 1, 2, or 3 stage process. So the 27, 118 take off that 27 that either would be premature, out of jurisdiction, or the ombudsman just said they're not investigating because there's no further value they can add or change to an outcome that had already been decided by the council. Of the 27 that went on to be investigated, the decisions obviously made by the ombudsman when we're providing the copy of the investigation that we've done at stage 1 and stage 2. If they've found fault or identified any injustice, that would then be what we would define as upheld. Yeah, I think that explains it, but let me know if it doesn't.
Mr. Poland?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the use of AI to make ever more complex complaints, this was something listening to Radio 5 Live when maybe maybe earlier this week, right? And then they had someone from one of the ombudsmans on there making exactly this point. He said, and it basically they're using ChatGPT or something similar to make really fine points of law that's taking an ages to go through for what is actually on the surface quite a simple complaint. So I guess my question and I guess that's going to be the future as well. You know, we're not putting the genie back in the bottle on this one. So is there any focus for us to use AI to respond to those complaints? You know what I mean? So AI is dealing with AI and then maybe speed up the process there a little bit. And in terms of the compliments, I think I say it previous years, but I think it is good that we record those because it shows where we're doing well. And I guess it makes sense sort of that a lot of those come from heritage libraries and so forth because they're sort of front facing, and they'll guess what most of the public sort of see in a positive way. But I'm glad we do record those. But yeah, in terms of how we deal with the AI. As I say, can we get bots fighting bots on this?
Do we want to go to legal for this, or do you want to pick this up?
Yeah, I'm dealing with a point about responding to AI complaints by using AI in legal services, particularly if there is any sort of reference to the finer points of law, which there often are. They will be sent to us for review. As lawyers, professionally, we have to be very careful in the way we use AI. So we can't use AI to respond to a legal point. And in my experience, references to legal points using AI are often inaccurate. So what happens in practice is that when one of these complaints comes across to legal services, extra time is involved in actually looking at any of these finer legal points and properly researching them, because some of them may just be what's commonly known as AI slop or hallucinating. So it is a challenge, and it is very time consuming dealing with these complaints. My experience is that the type of complaint that is drafted, and I use the term loosely, by any type of AI software, it's very lengthy, is somewhat exaggerated, and really labours each point, which comes back to the point that Lucy was making about the time it takes for officers to respond to that. But I would caution against the use of AI as a response to a complaint, particularly if there are legal aspects to that complaint.
Anything you want to add, Lucy?
Yeah, we're definitely exploring with IT colleagues as to whether not necessarily using definitely AI to do the responses, but actually to look through our bank of previous responses to see have we had anything similar in before. Yeah, because what we've got to do is try and just make, at the moment, all of our complaints come in, Chelsea's team then decide where they need, almost triage them, where do they need to go to, and then obviously it lands, doesn't it, with largely, service managers. And what we want to be able to try and do, is go, well, actually, the department have responded to something, fairly similar in the past, and actually it builds on our kind of template idea, so that they're not starting from scratch, and that's necessarily, every time, but that may or may not work. We've got to find some kind of ways of navigating this. I know I heard the same kind of article, and I know that some public sector organisations are looking at maybe starting to move to kind of almost like a predefined form, which kind of makes people kind of respond. Whether as things move on, we'll need to consider that potentially.
Dr. Hill. Thank you. I mean, there's an issue in my division that is probably AI enabled, let's say, that's caused a two-month delay on a highway scheme going ahead. Now, there's a quantifiable cost to that. There's a cost in your time and officer time, and it'd be interesting if anybody's ever tried to estimate what it's costing us in extra resources and time, because it's only going to get worse.
Yes.
And we're not, as we've heard earlier, not in a great financial position, and these things actually adding to it, and it maybe the making people fill a form in is the answer. I don't know. It's a deeply difficult challenge, because people have to be able to complain and make their point, but they're doing it in a way that makes life ever more complicated and difficult for us as publics. And effectively, they're spending the public's money. They're spending their own council tax dealing with a complaint in this strange circular situation. Thank you, Chair.
It's a similar theme on FOIs. Yeah, it's exactly the same. Yeah.
Strange world we live in. Chelsea, anything you want to add?
Although we've done no work on the cost that it would have incurred, we are looking more at a route of how we can be more efficient and use AI to our advantage, as Lucy alluded to. And so just some of the easy wins, I suppose, that we're looking at is we've exploring putting terminology on our current web form to indicate that actually, whilst it's okay to use AI as part of your complaint, it may take longer for us to respond to I suppose, not discourage, but and then when we are getting those lengthy, complicated complaints through, the officers will beginning a trial to actually use AI to summarise it, but then actually just call the service user to kind of remove that use of AI in there as well.
Mr. Piper.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to Dr. Hill's point, I wonder if we might use AI to calculate how much money AI is costing us. Also, going back to what Mr. Oliver was saying there, I read an article recently where I believe a barrister in Australia or New Zealand, was struck off because he did a case using AI, which actually quoted a case that didn't exist. I recently was writing a diatribe and I wanted AI to summarize it, and it did. But it changed the meaning and it actually brought into the text a lie, in fact, a defamatory lie, which fortunately I caught before it went out. But anyway, moving on. I don't know, you can't defame somebody who's dead, can you? So it wasn't defamatory. Going back to the report, one of the things which I always find with reports is you spend hours and hours and hours producing them, and they all look very pretty, and then some clever person comes along and shreds it. And I don't intend to shred it, but I do want to make one or two comments on it. That, first of all, I think that in generally rule of thumb is for every person that compliments you, 10 people complain about you. But you've got the total number now of compliments to 15% of the total of that. So as a ratio between the two, it's better than 15%, which is very laudable. And I wonder if your QR code has actually made that jump, because it was 7, 10, 10, 15. So that's suddenly, I don't know, but I congratulate you on increasing it by that much. And in fact, that almost takes into account a large chunk of the increase in numbers of calls. So that's the good news. Moving on, some of you will know from my rants previously in other committees, I hate abbreviations that we don't know, and whether PPM or TMM or whatever. And there's a number in this report. Now, if we go back to a comment that was made by our chair earlier, people, residents are likely to want to read this. Hopefully that's what we're writing it for. And therefore, if I struggle with some of the abbreviations, I would guess that they have a good chance of not understanding them either. And I do have a little list. To quote Gilbert and Sullivan, I have a little list. I won't sing it. On page 95, underneath the huge amount of compliments, there is a table which talks about case type, inquiry growth, etc., versus PY. I presume that meant previous year, but it wasn't terribly clear. On to page 96. There's a legend underneath, which is all letters. A and C, CEX. CEX, isn't that place that sells second-hand electronics in the high street? CFS, ENT, is that ear, nose and throat? Oh, no, that'll be ENT. If you get my gist, if you move on to page 97, there's a huge chunk in each of those bars of green, but I don't see green mentioned in the legend underneath. Right, so you'll be good to know that nothing I've picked up on 98. 99 again is ear, nose and throat and the second-hand electronics high street shop. Now, page 101 I found very interesting. I love pie charts. You know, the psychology of people, some people read better, understand, and some people understand better from talking, and other people understand better by looking at pictures and graphs. And I'm sure I fall into that category, which is probably why I noticed so many of these. So on page 101, there's a lot
Piper, we are running short of time, so
Yep,
if you're going to continue to read through the list, we get your drift. I don't think we need to see every example.
Well, okay, well, I mean, 101, there's a pie chart there with a number of segments, but there's a legend missing. I shall perhaps talk to you later about the list.
We got the message, and they'll take that back on board. Any other questions on this, Dr. North?
Thank you, Chair. Agree with my colleague again. It is sometimes really hard to understand the acronyms, so I support his request. Going back to my other colleague as well, I think when he first had a look and evaluated the number of responses, I think it was 27. So it leaves 91 that we couldn't see clearly what happened within this report. And if they were, not fully complete or it wouldn't uphold or didn't meet certain criteria, I would like to see that information, please, because when someone takes the time to make those complaints, there's 91 that have gone unanswered. Almost is I've got to look at it like I'm making the complaint myself as well. And if I'm one of those 91 people, do I know? Do I know my complaint's not being answered? Have I had any feedback? What's the protocol for that, and how does the council then list it? But I think that's what my colleague was also trying to figure out, because 91 is a big number compared to the 27, and maybe something that we could improve upon, please. And then from my own perspective as well, so a slight criticism here, but the council's own policy says that stage 2 should be answered within 20 working days, and we were at 61% before. And that I don't think is good enough. We should be at 100% of what we're saying that we should do. And I totally appreciate we spoke about vacancies earlier and other things that may cause some of that. But again, the person making the complaint is not aware of that delay, or are they? And is there things in place that you're going to do to communicate with that person? Yeah, really sorry, that whole department shut down now for school holidays, or they work term time or something like that. But I think people need to get responses to that. But it's fallen from 61% to 30. Sorry, forgive me, 31%. So what has caused that deterioration in comparison, and what's the recovery plan to at least even get to standard we were before, which isn't still 100%, but how are we going to improve that, please?
Yeah, thank you. Just on your second point first. So to be clear, the complaints don't go unanswered. So the 91 cohort that you're referring to will always have some form of communication. So it might be that they've gone through a stage 1 complaint and then they've gone straight to the ombudsman. So they're obviously just purely the ombudsman cases. The ombudsman will then contact us and say, you need to either confirm that it's exhausted the process or move forward to a stage 2, and the complaint will still reach an outcome. It just won't be through the ombudsman route if they've not exhausted our process. So the complaint doesn't get unanswered or not communicated back to the service user or complainant, will always be responded to both by us and by the ombudsman on whatever decision has been made, whether that's that the complaint was premature, it's out of jurisdiction, or what have you. But totally get the point that that information is missing, so we'll take that on board for next time. And then on stage 2. Oh yeah, sorry. The stage 2s, the volumes the response times has dropped, as we've mentioned. AI and the just sheer volume and complexity of the complaints has contributed towards that. Also just resourcing within the teams, which I'm sure is everyone's problem at some point along the way. We are aware that work needs to be done in terms of the response times. Again, complainants or service users are communicated to, so if we are not in a position to respond, by the 10 working days, we will reach out, apologise, provide a reason, and give an expected response date. So communication doesn't drop off a cliff, if you like. The communication from day one the complaint's received to every statutory timescale where we're supposed to have responded by, there'll always be a communication, so that's ongoing. And the team will work with the service to make sure that those responses are getting out, and if there is a valid reason why it can't be. So sometimes it's not always a case that it's due to the service. It might be that interviews need to take place, or certain investigations, or waiting on information from third parties. So those delays can be out of our control, but are also again communicated back to the complainant, so they have the full understanding and set expectations really. But as a team, there's work that's going on across all services to improve that timeliness in the responses. So we touched on earlier the use of complaint templates, because it can be very time consuming for services to start from scratch when they're writing the responses. Just further training on where to find information, and training of the complaints officers to be able to support better in terms of triaging, to kind of take out those complaints that shouldn't have maybe made it through to the service, which are taking up time where they could be spent focusing on those more complex complaints. So it will be ongoing work, and there isn't going to be a quick fix, because at the end of the day we only have as many officers and staff members to respond to the higher volumes of complaints. But monitoring of the workload and the resources will also be ongoing as well.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that explanation. That's really helpful. Sorry, I just got distracted for a second. Okay, I would still like to understand that data though. I would still like that in the report. So if I get this put before me, I want to know, yes, okay, it's dropped to almost half of what it was even before, which was already under. I mean, normally as a target threshold, I'm going to guess it would be above 80% at least, just to get into a good side of a metric that would be anywhere close to a green colour. And we're not doing that. We're at 61, then we've gone to 31. So I want to understand those other elements, those impacts, and I really want to have that before the committee so we can all evaluate it fairly. what I can see is that the send side of things generated 299 stage 1 complaints. Is that correct? Send and services are a significant portion of the complaints, and I totally take on board what everyone said about AI, but also it's making people more willing to make those complaints. Well, they'll go and ask AI, how should I write this to my local authority because I've got a problem with this service. So it's given some people a voice that didn't really have that before and may not have been able to articulate that very well. I know people as well who are divergent, if you like, on a diversity scale, and they really rely on AI. So I think it's something that's coming around, and we're going to have to get used to it, and we're going to have to look how we can work with it and monitor it better, because I don't see it slowing down. I see the opposite effect. So I think I really want to understand like what systematic learnings are we taking from this, because we have fallen short, we have gone down. And what learnings are being extracted from those complaints? How are we improving the service? And can we get more KPIs on that, of like remedy plans of how we could actually look to improve it for the next year, or lessons learned, something like that? Is that okay? Thank you.
Chair, can I suggest maybe a follow-up report, which kind of just delves into the detail a little bit more.
Okay, just a couple of points very quickly, because I know we've got another scrutiny here at 2:00, so we need to finish up. Yeah, you need something to eat. Just really quickly about the complaints that have gone to stage 2, 218 went to stage 2. That's quite shouldn't really be happening. They should be dealt with at stage 1, and I've had residents contact me that have just hit a brick wall with the local authority that I'm trying to support, especially with send. So I think there's a huge amount of work that needs to be doing there. We shouldn't be getting to stage 2. We should be dealing with this at stage 1. So I hope you take that back. And what we're paying out in compensation, £37,000, very small amount compared to our budget, but it's still council tax monies that we're paying out because we failed in some way or another to address an issue. So I hope you take that back and try and work on that. And then the compliments, I know we started work quite a few years ago to try and build this up, so it's really, really good to hear that we're finally getting there, and I think the QR code will be great. So just those few points from me. Don't need to come back on that because I know we're short of time. So are we okay to finish with this, and we'll move on to our final item? Thank you very much, Chelsea, for coming, and Lucy for being here. If I can ask members to not have speeches but very clear questions, because we do need to finish, so members can have something to eat before the next scrutiny. So East Midlands Shared Services Annual Report Update, pages 117 to 136. So Elaine Simpson, Head of East Midlands Shared Services, will present the item. I'll just let you get settled. And again, Mr. Fowler's still not here for any of these items. So I'll hand over to you, Elaine, when you're ready to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. So today I'm going to be presenting the East Midlands Shared Services, referred to as EMS, annual performance update for 2025-26, which is in the report provided. Within the report, you will find the background and the purpose of East Midlands Shared Services delivery and the partnership creation between Nottingham City Council and Leicestershire County Council back in 2010. The overall position is stable. EMS has continued to deliver HR, payroll, transactional finance and system support services whilst operating within the agreed budget and the governance arrangements. As with all the service areas, monthly detailed KPI reports and stakeholder meetings take place to make sure that there is visibility of performance, any escalations that are required, and also making sure that any improvement projects remain on track. So moving to the financial performance, EMS delivered an overall underspend of £281,000 against the £5.6 million budget, and the breakdown of that underspend is detailed within the report. And those underspends arose across several service areas, with the majority of the savings being delivered by vacant posts and backfill creations by internal promotions and levers, with also some operational efficiencies gained throughout the year as well. The overall underspend was shared equally and reimbursed to both partner councils at the end of the year. The service is able to distinguish between sustainable efficiencies and savings that arise through temporary situational savings that are not sustainable longer term. And as a result, the 2026-27 budget, as a like-for-like comparison, was reduced by around £160,000. Moving to the Finance Service Centre, they've also had a strong performance this year. 96% of the 38,000 LCC trade supplier payments were made within the 30-day statutory requirement. The report also details the improved debt recovery performance on the LCC's £20 million sundry debt ledger, with reductions in both overall past due debt of 9% and a reduction in the debt age over 90 days by a further 1.5%. One noticeable change during the year was the successful integration of the LCC's adult social care debt recovery into EMS from a partially outsourced service, which should give a better end-to-end service and increase the visibility and approach, I guess, to that service. Just for context, that adult social care invoices around £52 million a year for services paid within those service users. So whilst the move does provide a more structured end-to-end approach, this sector does have much older, more complex cases that do dominate the focus, and therefore there is a need to work collaboratively with the adult social care finance teams and the care pathway to try and iron out some of these blockages to payment. The FSC also set up over 4,000 new LCC trade suppliers, each one electronically verified with a banking system to mitigate the risk of payment fraud. Excuse me. 80% of those were set up within the agreed service level arrangement. Registrations completed outside of the SLA are due to missing or incorrect information being provided, which does inevitably slow down the process. The service also handles all inbound finance related queries, of which there were over 78,000 within the financial year. Moving on to the Employee Service Centre performance, referred to as the ESC. The ESC continues to ensure that everybody's salary gets paid on time, which in itself may seem like a simple singular task, but in reality that service must ensure that all the legislative changes to pension contributions, maternity pay, annual pay awards are all managed and implemented effectively, as well as reconciling the pay records to identify any anomalies or contract changes across the 168,000 employee payments that they make. That service also paid 385,000 payments to LCC's pensioners within that period. The ESC is also responsible for all recruitment vacancies, placing 2,640 job adverts for LCC and onboarding, which includes the right to work and identity document processing. There's 6,000 new and amended employment contracts and 16,000 DBS checks processed, as well as all the inbound HR and payroll queries, of which there were over 62,000 within the year. Payroll continues to operate at a really high level of accuracy, with overpayments accounting for only 0.2% of the total transactions. However, a number of overpayments, whilst it is small, did increase slightly during the year, which is detailed in the report. The analysis shows that these are largely caused by late notification of contractual changes, starters and leavers, and other employee changes across a range of services. And the ESC has recently identified and reconciled all of those historical cases to date as part of an internal project, and subsequently implemented a new and improved recovery process with deadlines so that we can encourage service area compliance. And the detection of overpayments, whilst it is a negative, should be seen as a positive control within the service, because without those controls, some of them would definitely go unnoticed. And I am pleased to say that all of those overpayments for people that are still employed are recouped directly out of their salary, and for people that have left, there is repayment plans in place for all of those. On customer experience, it is one of the ongoing priorities to make sure that the service improvements are reflected in customers' experience, and overall satisfaction did increase from 85% to 89%. Customers continue to rate the staff professionalism and customer knowledge very highly within the surveys carried out, and feedback has also helped to shape some of the improvements made in that area over recent years and continues to contribute to that. Customer satisfaction responses do remain low. It's a subject that is talked about regularly, and it's not uncommon in shared services where interactions form part of a routine business process, and users may engage frequently with the service and submit requests several times a day. Therefore, the satisfaction scores we feel should be viewed as a direction of travel rather than a definitive measure on its own. But customer feedback is supplemented with wider surveys and engagement and feedback sessions to make sure that the service can focus on suggested improvements that are made by its users. Technology and business development. This team does provide technical support and system configuration expertise across multiple improvement projects. The team processed over 10,000 inbound system support related queries over the financial year. Also secured was an interim extension to the current Oracle managed support service currently provided by Maztec. Technology and service improvements do remain critical in the long-term sustainability of M's service provision. There has been some really good progress in several areas, including some process redesigns, the Oracle Redwood implementation, and other technology developments. The service has developed an in-house Oracle Fusion-based report that replaced the need for an external platform to complete the industry standard 60% salary payroll check report. This is used to make sure that the accuracy of payroll is double checked before all of those payments are pushed and sent to payroll to the bank. The new seeded teacher's pension, or MCR, combines 3 reports into one singular reconciliation to be submitted to HMRC. This was a statutory change that was required and completed and implemented by the service. This team has also supported the testing and delivery of the paperless direct debit project, which allows agents to complete forms on the service user's behalf if they're unable to do so. It also automatically verifies the bank details automatically and populates the details within the system, removing the element of human error. And it also reduces the print and post costs associated with the old paper method. Benchmarking is also underway to capture key metrics across the service, hopefully to measure similar service statistics across other local authorities to provide some confidence that the service is value for money, and measures such as the total cost to process and pay a supplier, total cost to process and pay an employee, the average days to pay suppliers, debt recovery rates will all form part of those metrics. At present, we know that we present very high volumes of transactions that go through the service, but we are aware that compared to what element is a gap there, which we are actively working on so that we can provide those statistics. Automation is used to process volumes en masse, removing any manual entry to the process, and it's always been utilised heavily within the service, and it's what allows the service to process such high volumes with a relatively small team in place. In reality, if the service was not driven by technology the way that it is, it wouldn't be able to provide the service that it currently provides. The development of in-house expertise within this team has also allowed the service to reduce the council's reliance on third parties to deliver some of the system changes, and as a result has absorbed some of the cost of delivering some of the enhancements that would have ordinarily cost the council a significant amount of money if they were delivered and supported by a third party. As the subject of AI is at the forefront of many discussions, it is something that the service is embracing, but it is using AI as a drafting tool to help articulate correspondence and summarise information so that communications remain uniform and professional. AI is still very much in its infancy, and we need to be really careful about how we use it, making sure that it's used correctly in line with the required data requirements and governance and ethical use. And obviously the accuracy considerations are also in place. At present, it is allowing EMS to become more robust and uniform in some of its processes, which is allowing the service to absorb some more improvements and projects that the council want us to work on, and free up some time so that we can be well prepared to support Nottingham and Leicester through the upcoming LGR projects. Moving on to audit and governance. So EMS is happy to report that following the internal audit carried out by Nottingham City Council's internal audit, it returned a significant assurance opinion, which is a sound system of governance, risk management and internal control in place and operating effectively, which provides some confidence that best practice is in place. The planned audit approach for 2026 has been documented and is due to be presented at the Joint Committee in September for final approval. Alongside this, completion rates for performance, annual performance reviews and mandatory training also remains high. And internal promotions have also supported career development, which is positive despite the backfill and the vacancy situations that it has created. The EMS strategic plan has been updated to and agreed for 2026 to 2030, and that is included in Appendix A of the report. So I'd like to highlight that EMS service and its attention to continuous improvement was reinforced when the FSC received the SIPFA Highly Commended Award for services to debt recovery, and the ESC were also winners of the Midlands Shared Service Innovation Award for services to HR triage. And so for the service, that independent recognition helps to reinforce confidence in what the service is trying to achieve. Performance remains consistently high, with between 97 and 98% of customer queries resolved within the agreed service levels. And the level of service delivery is particularly significant when considered alongside the vacancy position and the major transformation projects that have been completed within the year. So the focus in the year ahead is firstly to ensure that the right capacity and resource is in place, and making sure that EMS is ready to provide a full service and support both Nottingham and Leicestershire through that LGR project. There are challenges along the way and there is still some room for improvement, but the overall performance report is a positive one. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Really good report, and you presented really well, and it answered all the questions that I did have. So my main one's about LGR, but you've kind of covered that you're working to make sure that everyone still gets paid when we go into vesting day. So that's really good news. Any questions from anyone? Mr. Poland.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. In terms of the customer satisfaction side of things, am I right? So it says the response rate is 1.75%. Is that 1.75% of the 151,000 service tech inquiries?
It is the total, yes. It is very low, and I think that is because it's generally considered a day-to-day process rather than a service that's provided. And if you're submitting things several times a day or every week, to be giving feedback on that every single time can be quite onerous, which is why we do supplement that feedback request with separate projects to make sure that we can try and gain some traction and some opinions on how people feel about the service moving forward, to give us that context on where we need to work on improving.
So, I mean, in some ways it's remarkable. I used AI to do this, right? And it's 2,642 people, in fact, is the number we're talking about roughly, which, bearing in mind you're dealing with, as you say, day-to-day transaction, is it? I mean, where I'd be interested to see where those people come from. Are they people within your team that know the importance of? Do you know what I mean? Because it's like you say, it's so day-to-day that, like, who has the time to do that?
So that includes Nottingham City Council, Leicestershire County, and all of the external suppliers, customers, and service users that run through that service. So the volume is very, very high.
So, yeah, no, I mean, as I say, if anything, it's a compliment to you. So, generally speaking, in my experience with feedback, people feedback more when they're unhappy. Right, it maybe it'd be a better world if we fed back more when we're happy about things, but the reality is we'll get annoyed by something but actually and the satisfaction is 85 to 89%. So of those 2,642 people, the overwhelming majority of them are happy and have responded. So as I say, I think that in some ways it's remarkable that you've got that many responding, and it's a credit to you that the overwhelming majority of those are happy.
Thank you. Yeah, there is an assumption that no feedback is good feedback, but we can't make that assumption. But when you've got so little to go on, we have to presume that if people really were not happy with the service, they would let us know.
Dr. North?
It was really the same question,
Okay.
Chair, but I feel a bit different about the response. I still feel it's still low, and you have to find other ways to probably try and improve that. And I think it'll be interesting to see the benchmarking framework that you speak about as well take shape and develop, because it'd be really nice to have more comparative data as well and compare EMSS against other local combined authorities that use shared services. I think that's something that will have to be evolved though at this point, because I couldn't see that readily available.
Has been developed several times over the years, believe it or not, with changes in how easy it is to give feedback. So there's just a smiley face, an amber face, or a red face. So we've made sure that people don't have to put chapter and verse in. We've tried to make it as click of a button as we possibly can, but I do think it's the nature of the service and the frequency. We are in touch with other shared services, not necessarily local authority, but given that that's kind of a service provision, we're hoping that will give us some insight as to in general in the marketplace how people encourage that feedback and make sure that they can improve those numbers. So that would be the next protocol for us to actually look at, see how other shared services do that.
Just as a quick suggestion, I do know a company that did similar, and they actually attached it to the payslip, and it seemed to have a really improved response. So everyone seems to notice that one.
Okay. Any other questions before we bring this to an end? No, thank you very much. Really good report and really good to hear it's working well. Okay, on to item 14, date of future meeting. So the next Scrutiny Commission is scheduled for the 11th of November, starting at the later time of 2 p.m. And item 15, as advised, I have no urgent items. You've got half an hour before your next scrutiny meets, some of you. So thank you very much for everyone's attendance.